I call to order the October 26, 2021 Special Board of Aldermen meeting. Please join us in
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alderman Becker.
Here.
Alderman Rucker.
Here.
Alderman Osteen.
Here.
Alderman Ross.
Here.
Alderman Morose. Here. Mayor Albery.
here. All right, we do have a quorum. For the record, there is no unfinished business on tonight's agenda. Our new business is the second of 3 scheduled budget workshops to review the FY 2022 operating budget draft number 1. Now turn the meeting over to City Administrator.
Thank you. So following our overall discussions last night, tonight we get into the departments. And the first thing I'd like to ask, I know we've got a couple of departments in the general fund. We'll start with start at the beginning and go down the departments by numerical order. If you have questions referring back to the O&M schedule or the personnel schedule, if there's some specific questions on the department, we can hit those first before we go to the capital, if that's how you prefer. I know I handed out a summary of the O&M, kind of the increases and decreases. So as we get to a department or kind of dictate where we start with what department, if there were specific questions. I know we have 3 departments in general fund that do have changes in personnel schedule, so we want to make sure we get to those by the departments. And we have several departments that have capital, but not all. So we for sure want enough time to discuss the capital, but I want to make sure if there's any questions with O&M, we can start there on a specific department. And then let the personnel changes and number get taken care of and then move to capital. I really didn't you guys. Again, we're just trying to avoid going line by line, but those are the 3 topics tonight. New personnel changes to be explained, and number-wise, people-wise, account-wise, and then any topic on O&M that you saw that you maybe want a further explanation on. So I'll look to you guys.
So I guess I'm not quite following it, if I can ask.
Okay, I think what Jim is trying to say is that we're trying to keep this thing at a higher level, okay, which is what we talked about doing. We will attempt not to get into each fund, okay, unless, you have a reason to go there. We talked a little bit the other day, or last night, about O&M, and of course personnel is a portion of that. And as she said, in those cases where we have changes, in personnel, if you all have or would like, discussion on those, please ask for it. And then we will, of course, we've got capital broken down by the particular departments. So if you have any questions on capital, and then of course any miscellaneous questions you might have, we'll start with general funds, go through general funds, then take on the ambulance fund, and then final item for the evening will be CIP.
So I guess going down the numerical order, and I'm referring on the page 12, because that just happens to be the O&M page. If I start down the numerical order of departments, building inspection is the first department that has capital and has changes in personnel. So maybe ask this, are there any questions on specifics from the mayor and board down to city attorney department that we would want to hit first before we start with building inspection?
Yes,
I
Richard.
just have one, and that is, I believe there's an extra head count, but that is being shared between human resources and general utility and treasury. So, right, and you, right? Okay, so I kind of understand a little bit because I've talked with Cindy about some of that half the duties over here, but what are the duties over on your side? Because that's an additional half of a head count to your department, is that right?
It's
It's a reduction.
Oh, it's a reduction. Oh, it's moving?
Yeah.
I apologize.
It's flattening out.
Okay,
It's
got it.
just sharing existing
Never mind.
force.
I think, okay, for some reason I can't get that through my head, apologize. And That's all I have.
Anyone else? Then let's go down to, building.
Building inspection, which is on page, boy, I should have that marked. Page 36. That's where the expenditure detail is. The next page is the capital. And so before, I guess we'll just start with the additional request for manpower. But before I turn that over to Ron, I handed out a new capital investment sheet. So as I mentioned yesterday, after I printed this, I found a couple of pages that I didn't get. So in front of you, where you were sitting, there was a new capital investment sheet that looks like the one in your budget. There were 2 changes made. There were 2 different I tables, and I mentioned this first because it hits Ron's department. In building inspection, there originally was an I plan table requested.
That's okay.
Okay,
I'll find it.
somebody must have passed that down.
Right there in your left hand.
Ready, yeah.
Right, that's it. You got one of those right here. Okay, you got one right there.
Okay.
That's the update. Oh, my apologies.
This
That
is
is
the
the
yeah,
update.
this is the update. So originally, when we were creating the draft, there were 2 I-plan tables requested, one for building inspection and one for engineering, which also was construction inspection. If you refer to the newest, it went black.
What was that?
He said
It was
good night.
Sound like a
Yeah.
coyote coming.
Whippoorwill.
Ron, stop it.
So another request I had was to highlight any capital from general fund that would fit the parameters of CIT, and that's your yellow boxes, so we can cross that bridge, I guess, when we get there. So anyway, before we get to capital, I guess we will, Ron, I'll turn it over to you for the personnel change.
All right, I've provided you all with a detailed explanation of why I'm requesting the reinstatement of the second building inspector. But in short, historically, we had 2 positions. We had a building inspector with the building department. We had a compliance officer that at one time was shared between police and planning, and then it went full-time planning. We then combined that and took that position and made it 50-50 building inspector compliance. During the beginning of the pandemic, seeing a drastic reduction in construction after the furlough, I couldn't justify bringing back both inspectors due to the workload that we had, the reduced workload. However, with the numbers that I provided, when we made that decision, that year we did $10 million worth of valuation and construction. To date, as of September 23rd, we're up over 30 million. So we're back above the numbers we were when we had 2 full-time inspectors, and I'm requesting to go back to that level of staff.
Questions?
So,
Okay.
Ron, will your department, with these 2 positions, will be responsible for construction, inspections, and compliance?
Yes, sir. And the way I did it previously, and the way I would intend to do it, should you grant me the second inspector, one will have the priority of compliance inspections and backup building inspections. The other will be prioritized as a building inspector and backing up compliance, whether they're offered vacations or sick time, or if the load necessitates it, which I see that being a factor in the future with building inspections.
That's why I've got a question, because I know that, winter months, you can probably get by with 1 in construction, but summer months, you need sometimes 3.
Right.
So you could end up, okay. No problem.
Any other questions? Richard?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Well, and what would we pay this party?
Salary range,
I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
it's in the salary.
What, excuse me?
If you go, Phyllis,
Salary ranges.
yeah, if you go to page 8, or with our pay plan, we already have the building inspector benchmark to 9, so it would be the same range as the current inspector, it'd just be adding the same, a second inspector.
Okay.
So the pay range starts at 43 and goes up, it'd be the same level as the current inspector,
Okay.
the same pay range level, obviously different.
Richard, you had a question? Phyllis, is that all you?
I'm fine.
Richard, you had a question?
What tends to drive the amount of, inspection, number of inspections? More number of permits or valuations?
That's a great question. It would vary from project to project. Valuation, the size of, it's really hard to compare because it totally depends on the exact project. I would probably lean towards, if you had 100 small projects that equal one large project, the large project's still gonna have a lot of inspections because you don't do one in 10. Let's take topside. We don't do one footing inspection. On a small project, we do one footing inspection. On topside, we may do 30 footing inspections because they do a section, retaining walls, piers. So the driving factor, it depends.
And I guess this is more of a conceptual type question, not necessarily for you, but more for the board or anyone else who wants to chime in, but compliance. I'll be quite honest, Ryan, you and I talked about this just briefly, but I've been kind of glad we don't have a compliance officer, to be quite honest. I don't think I've caught as many calls from any other area of the city as it was with compliance, because when we had let's just call it more aggressive than currently compliance division or approach, there was some people that, were getting calls because they weren't maintaining their property well, even without complaints being called in. And I'll be quite honest, it just didn't seem quite right to me. Now, when a complaint was called in, that was a whole other story, okay? But I think we get very few of those, or it looks like it, if I glance at these numbers real quick. So I'm not convinced that we want to have a person that spends half their time on compliance. And I don't know how the other board or other folks feel about that, and that doesn't mean we don't need an inspector. Maybe we need an inspector that half of their time is focused on something else, okay? And I'll get to that in a second, possibly as an idea. But if we do want to be more aggressive with compliance, then maybe we need this person. So I just like to have the conversation about where we go with compliance, right? If that's the right time to do this.
Sure.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
We've had a general conversation, in the past previous board meetings, but certainly, one of the problems that we had, and I think we realized, is that we did not have the workforce to be able to do an aggressive compliance. It was basically determined at that point that we would, not go out and look for issues. We would wait for issues to come to us. Okay, so go ahead, Richard.
And that's fine if that's, how would I say, if that's the way we're going to continue, then I'm not sure that there's as much need for compliance as a half a person. I'll just say it that way.
I thought at the last strategic planning session, we discussed that we needed somebody that would be more focused on compliance. Because basically it's a afterthought at this point for that department is, we're going to go do this site inspection here. Oh, guess what? The grass in this yard on the way there is 4 feet tall, or it's very secondary. It was never a main focus. Not to say that it needs to be a main focus, but at least we have somebody that would be part of the focus. I thought we were all in agreement on the last strategic planning session. Yes, we need to kind of step up that for somebody who's going to be more responsible for compliance, other than having a fly-by-night. Somebody saw something on the way somewhere else. I think everybody's in agreement that that's what we had.
Well, I agree with that, the one thing I thought we talked about at that point, but we needed to get our department heads to help out and go through the ordinances. And because we have ordinances that we're not following. We've got an ordinance that says this shall not happen, and we're not enforcing that ordinance, okay? Because it's not been the practice. So we need to either change the ordinance, or we need to change the ordinance, or we need to enforce it. And one of those things was some things that I know Ron and I talked about individually of what he could do to bring things to us that they're not enforcing, but yet we have said, either previous mayor, I don't know about this one, but previous mayor I know made comment about don't enforcing certain parts of the ordinances. And so that's kind of just been going on, okay? Well, then if that's it, then let's change the ordinance. And if not, then let's enforce the ordinance. But I don't think we need to not have a compliance officer. I think we do need to have one, half of a person that can handle that. If that's what you think they can, but I think that we need to be a little more aggressive with getting those ordinances cleaned up. And I was on a rampage myself individually and just decided to start traveling more.
Well, I know Ron and Carrie, after the strategic plan in August, I know they're aware of that request. I can't speak to how far they've gotten, but hopefully we'll be seeing.
Well, and the problem we've got with, enforcing here and not enforcing there, it just creates more and more problems. Because the first thing that happens is, they'll come in and say, why are you coming after me? I went down and I saw this happening here, here, and here, okay? So, I fully agree. I think the way to do this is to be more aggressive in our compliance, as opposed to being, lackadaisical and waiting for reports.
I had exactly what you just talked about, two of those situations I've dealt with in the last 4 months.
And Richard, I think you had said you've received more complaints from a compliance standpoint, or did I miss
The
it?
complaints that I receive of people that reach out to me, there's been more people reach out to me about compliance over the last 4 years than anything else. And the ones that seem to be the hot are the ones where, at the end of the day, Katie was who our compliance officer was. She was driving around and saw something, okay? And I don't want the compliance police out driving around. If the board prefers that, no problem. But I just don't see that. I have no problem when you get somebody in compliance to react to compliance issues, okay? The neighbor called in and said somebody's deck's falling off and it's unsafe. Sure, if we know about it, we need to deal with that. I completely agree with Kevin that if we've got things that we don't want to enforce, then we need to get that cleaned up. No doubt about that, okay? But I just don't really, I don't support a compliance officer who takes the approach of, I'm gonna go out and look for compliance issues. Now, if there's safety issues, okay, then okay, maybe. But it just, what I saw happen and what I got reported to me was my windows aren't painted or my door's not closing right or something like that. And they didn't argue that it could be taken care of, but they just, the whole, how would I say, aura of there's a compliance police out here driving around. Surely you guys have something better to do. And I'm not saying you do, but that was their impression, okay? There's gotta be something better you guys can be focusing on than this. So
I think once we clean our compliance, our ordinances up, then then I would support a compliance officer out looking around. But if we've got things in the ordinance that we don't worry about or we don't want to worry about, we don't care if their house is painted or not, then get it out of the ordinance. I think that's where we need to go. I think we need the compliance officer, and then I think we need to clean it up. I jumped in on Phillips twice, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna comment, I know there's been a handful of times in the last few years, I've called Ron on some couple instances that have been the same problem, the same location, and said, please, I was concerned about liability, not only for the owner of the property, but for the city, looking at liability. And I think, you know what, with all of this new development that I'm hearing that we're gonna be getting in the next few years, and I think, you know what, we're looking at progress, guys, and one guy cannot handle it. And we need someone that can be out there on top of it And I think our citizens would respect that. Thank you.
And that was only 50% of what we wanted to do to begin with, correct?
That is correct. Their focus would be compliance. As far as if there's a compliance issue, that's what you take care of. After that, then you go, then we're on building inspection.
Okay. So it's not necessarily like we are
The reason for that is we
wanting
have,
to add a compliance Nazi, that's their full-time job, that's going to be part of the responsibilities.
Right, okay, that was the model we had before, though. There was some compliance Nazi going on.
Officer, yeah.
Right, they were part-time, but they did inspections, Katie did inspections as in compliance, right? And when she reacted to things that were reported, even though people didn't like it, they didn't have a leg to stand on, because at the end of the day, I could say, well, I'm sorry, your neighbor happens to know the rules, reports it, I can't help you with that, okay? But it was the ones where, I got contacted and Katie had been by, and I was like, well, how did you find it? And she goes, well, I was driving by and I saw it, okay? Those are the ones that didn't feel good, okay? And I don't support it at this point. Now, if we can get our ordinances down to the point that it's, significant issue that they see it that one. But you've got too large a town, and I think that there's going to your point, John, that there's going to be too much inconsistency perceived, maybe not actual, but perceived, that this is going to be something that it's going to affect brand and image, for lack of a better term, in my mind, if we become aggressive.
But when we keep talking about cleaning up ordinances, well, how do we get that information to decide which ones we need to clean up? Wouldn't that come from a compliance officer? Wouldn't that come from that department?
No, it actually would come from the department, the individual department, I would think, and then the compliance officer could be a part of, assisting with that.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So that's something I believe we need to implement now,
And
not
make
wait
it a
to clean up the
recommendation.
ordinances.
Right, yeah. But, a lot of it's gonna have to come directly, I think, from the departments.
Yeah, and I think that by the time you hire a compliance officer, this person, and they get up to speed on all of our ordinances and so forth, there's going to be some time before that they can have any meaningful impact on what should be implemented.
Well, that's true, but you also have kind of a compliance officer. It depends on what you're able to hire for. If we went out and hired a building inspector who had more experience in that as opposed to compliance, we've got Josh who's doing both right now, so he could continue to assist with that, with the department heads, in moving that forward, so. I guess let me just ask this, is there any more questions or comments on this? And if not, what is the direction of the board to consider this position?
I support the compliance officer, I support the manning request, but I want to put a date on when we're going to get these ordinances gone through by planning, by all the different departments. The board can jump in and do them as well, go through them and see what you don't like, but we need to get those things cleaned up.
Proactive.
I would look to Ron and Carrie because I think there's several in his section, so they would be am I correct in that, be the main sections?
Yes, both of us, primarily me as the supervisor, the compliance officer, but there are a lot of nuisance codes that come out of Carrie's section. I think we can get started on that right away, and I don't see a reason.
Going through and redlining the stuff that we're not enforcing, and we know has not been enforced, then I think those are the things we need to ask ourselves, do we want to enforce them or do we want to change them? And I can think of a number of them off the top of my head that we need to look at that. Signage.
For those of you who have already spent some time looking at this, I suggest that you get with Ron and, supply the information that you might need to get started with that. And for those of you who haven't, if I could get you to, that would be great, and then we can get started. Can we have something by, say, mid-April to look out for the board to get this started?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that gives us plenty of time, to get something before the board and start, making some considerations. And quite frankly, I think as the board looks at some of the initial recommendations, it's going to give staff some direction on where you all will be coming from on some of the changes that you all might want to see. But as far as this position, is the board in agreement that we move forward with this position in the budget for next year? Okay, then let's just do, all in favor, hand raised, please. We have 4, and we've got going against.
And that's a caveat. I didn't know we were going to a vote, okay? Until we know what we're gonna do with the pay plan, I think we're ahead of ourselves by,
Richard, what I want to do is I want it left in the budget. If we have to make adjustments based on the pay plan, then we will come back and make those adjustments. But I don't want to come back later on, and we've had this discussion, even you and I, about, how we did this in the past. I'd like to solidify this as we go through, so that we're not, just,
we can make some
rehashing
plans.
this as we move through.
Right.
If we make some other decisions that might affect this, then we will have to adjust
Okay.
something. We may or we may not have to adjust something based on that decision. So, anything else there?
But one other question kind of ties to this, but have we made any progress or do we have any plans for what I'm going to call record digitization that we've talked about now for a year and a half, and how we're 10 to 15 years behind in getting records digitized? If so, what is the, pardon me?
I have made no progress, no, digitizing any records.
Mike,
So-
can you add to some of the in-code stuff? I know city HR, city court, or city clerk, and even treasurer, they have, in fact, one of the scanners in Tara's budget is for that. In-code's got some updates or additions that's for next year that will aid to that as other departments come online.
You want to talk about that now or wait till IT?
That answers his question there.
Okay.
Or we
Richard,
wait till IT.
why don't we address that under IT and see if that may be a more appropriate place to discuss that?
Okay.
Okay, I know that one of the things that I-plan table, that was one of the reasons why that was being, looked at, so that we, no longer had to retain the records that we did, that were required to retain. And we would have a database to be able to do that with, but obviously that's been pulled off the table. The table's been pulled off the table,
Okay.
okay?
That's fine. We'll talk about that.
Okay. Let's move on to capital. You have a capital request, Ron?
I have a few.
Okay,
Actually, just from inspection and we'll move around.
Yeah.
So we're going to cover both right now, both departments.
we will. Let's get the building inspection out there, and then we'll move to building. Ron?
Yes, sir, the capital request, vehicle, the primary, I've got a couple of desk chairs. The I-plan table's off, and then I have the vehicle, that, it's just that, it was our management plan, I had it slated for this year. It's a 2004 Ford Explorer with 97,000 miles. It's not in bad mechanical condition. It's just this is when historically we have slated and tried to change out our vehicles based on looks historically. We do have rust over one wheel well. It's not surface rust, it is all the way through. We got rusty wheels on it, but it's not terrible. Just said, I'm just bringing it to the board's attention. If it's something we want to replace, great. If not, we can make it a little longer.
Discussion on capital items.
And I say that, I guess I should clarify. In the past, there was more of a focus, and when I say in the past, pre this board, there was greater focus on the aesthetics of certain equipment as well as our grounds. So that's where I come from. When something starts to look rough, I bring it to your attention. If it's all a matter of opinion. In my opinion, it looks rough. That's how I think.
What was that you said, Kevin? I'm sorry.
Kevin, what was your question?
Oh,
And I apologize, I didn't print off all the pictures, our printer was down. We had to do some manipulating to get these to print.
So once again, it's a 2004
It's
with
a 2004 with 97,000, it's 96,700 some miles.
we're putting about 3,500 miles a year on it.
mileage you have a year for replacement and repair. It's going to be pretty antiquated.
Why,
Go ahead, Kevin.
you're talking about the car, I got a question about the
Right.
car.
Yeah, that's,
I'll wait till we.
okay. This is a picture of the car. Put it down so
You want to see
folks
this
can see
picture,
it.
Phil?
You look like they're like vehicles.
Mhm.
That's pass it around, I'd like to see it once. When you get done. Okay, Kevin, you had a question?
What's the situation with the guy with the tables? Is this gonna be pushed off completely
Yes,
until
no.
next year, and we regroup and visit it, or?
Yes, not completely pushed off, at least delayed. I'm not convinced that it's the best value for the city. Fortunately, I had the privilege to go through a class a couple of weeks ago, and a gentleman was pushing, he was kind of a home-built system. Don't use TVs, use monitors, he's got this, he's got that, and it was a little cheaper. What I would rather do is vet this further. I would like to go take a look at each option in person. I want to have hands-on. I want to talk to people in person and see what are your pros, what are your cons. I think the I-plan table it's really nice, but I don't know that it's the best thing for us right now. You know, as far as, I don't want to jump into a Cadillac, so to speak.
So you're going to put this off for a full year?
Yes.
Give you a year to analyze what you want?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say, from my vote, that it doesn't need to be pushed off a year. That this is technology that we need. We need this technology so that people, because this is the way people are doing business. Now, if it's not this device, I don't have any problem with that. But we need to have the means for your office to be able to receive this building information via wire, via internet, via some way other than some people walking in here and giving you a set of blueprints. We need not to have to continue to store blueprints. And whether it's this piece of equipment or something else, we need to be working towards that. Now, I don't want to wait another year. I don't have any problem with the fact that you're not comfortable. I don't have any problem with that at all. For my vote, if you figure out what, when, where we need to do in 2 or 3 or 4 months, bring it back to us and nothing saying we can't figure out where we can get it out, find some place to get it. I don't want to wait another year. I don't want to wait another year.
But I think we have the capabilities now, and I will have to lean on Michael, maybe not this meeting, but later on. We have the means to receive it. I have guys that send me plans and have me do a pre-review on them, simple plans. I can receive complex plans as well. I just don't have a system set up to where I'm transferring them over and saving them anywhere in particular. I can print them off now as well on the plotter that Kerry purchased years ago. I didn't realize that we had that capability. So we can do it without buying this big piece of equipment. I mean, we can store it, we can receive it, we can store it. I can't view it. I would not want to review large prints on my small monitor because you're constantly expanding and moving, get lost in the plans. But I could come up with
Ron, what is your capability of taking that document as it comes in and then, because it's electronic, pushing it out to your building inspectors and then also pushing it over to, to Kevin's group, over there too, for their use?
Yes, we can do that. We don't have that implemented now, where we require electronic submissions.
Right.
Any changes that I've made in the past, as far as the logistics of our department, I have tried to implement January 1 of X.
Right.
So yeah, that's something I could certainly do, or have in the works. Providing proper notification, have that done by January 1, 2022.
Okay, well, I mean, this kind of gets back to the one issue that you brought up that we kind of tabled for, later in the meeting, and that is, storage of documents like that and doing it electronically and the value of that. So you got a comment on that, Richard?
Well, I was just going to say, just for clarity, if I'm a design engineer right now, and can I submit a set of plans for review for permit electronically today?
No.
Okay. We need to
Let
get
me clarify. You can. I mean, it's possible, but we don't accept them that way right now.
Oh, I understand that. In other words, because I've had to, it's been a good while now, and I don't know if I'll work again, but at the end of the day, I've had a call from Marshke Engineering. Can you go pick up the set of plans up of Smart Printing and take them over to City Hall, because I can't send plans in electronically, okay? And so I agree with Kevin, we need to get there quick. That's the first step, but there's also the backside of this that we've got all these, legacy records that need to be taken care of. And I think what Kevin, what Ron and I talked about this, that workstation was a large monitor, a hard drive, and and maybe some software. And that's the part I'm not clear about. But at the end of the day, you can buy a large monitor, and we've got hard drive space, I believe. Is that right? We talked about this back in May, I think.
We have some file server space,
Right,
yes, but
right.
depending on the size of how much we're wanting to integrate all the legacy stuff, that needs to be looked at.
And so the challenge that I have is that I would rather us, if we need to, enhance our server space than buy something that's remote and unique to the system, okay, from a consistency standpoint. And I think it'd be more efficient. And so when I talked to Ron about some of that, he said he'd already pulled it, but I think he understood that. And I think that's what he's trying to tell you. And so when I said record digitization, what I'm talking about is all the legacy files, okay? From a go-forward basis, we probably need to do that first, of course, okay? The engineers should be able to submit plans electronically. I would hope by January 1st, no later than February 1st, to be quite honest. It's just my preference. But there's also, when I said digitization, I was curious where we're getting all these legacy, what's the plan to work on these legacy files that have been hanging out there, and they keep piling up because we only take them by paper anyway. So, I mean, the piles are getting bigger, and it was huge to start with, so.
So some of that, with mechanization, we've taken care of, but there are other things that are much more sophisticated that continue to need attention, so. Barry, you had a comment?
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason that I bought that digital scanner that Ron was talking about years ago. Okay, so the plotter that we have is also a large format digital scanner.
Oh.
And the ideology behind that was to start moving building permit files and then my subdivision files into a digital format. But the issue has been server space. I was told back when I bought it, we'll work towards getting server space so that you can do it, which never happened. I understand that is a very large amount of server space when you start talking about all of the building permit files he has or all of the subdivision files that I have. So I've got that large drawer, that's all subdivisions. And my desire would be to put that into digital format. So if I want to go out and look at Osage Commons subdivision, I don't have to go out there and open a drawer and hope it's there. And, the engineers didn't have it. I can pull it up, bring it up, And the idea was the same for Ron, simply because, there are definitely times that both Ron and I need to ask Pam, hey, can you find building permit file 12-210, because I need to see the site plan or what have you. That's the ideology behind that scanner, and it's still there and it's ready to roll. It's just that we have never had the server space. I mean, we've been told, since then, when it started out with Jim Davis, that we would crash the system if we tried to do that. So it's like, okay, well, we need to do this, we need to do this, we'll work towards getting that space. And, I know it's a lot of space. So I think at this point, what my contention would be is that we definitely have the tools to do that. Plus, I guess it would take Pam quite a bit of time over the winter time, sending stuff from every file through that, but she can do that. It's the space on the servers to house all that digital memory. So
I don't even think we need to have a discussion here of how much server space we have, but I do think that it sounds like we have enough server space that we can start at some point when you're
At
ready to
least
have a monitor
receiving, and starting from point A to point B.
right, okay, and figure out the server space that we may or may not need, which we probably do to get everything else on.
see, I get PDFs of all of the site plans and everything that I do for rezonings and all those things currently, and they are saved in my server on Planner within our server. So if I want to go out and look at my particular stuff, I can go do that since about 2012 or so. But as far as like what Ron's building permit files will need, that's far more substantial. And when you do the large format, if we start scanning the large format stuff, then it's just a lot of space, and I know that. So,
you know, there was definitely the desire, I believe, back in 2011 was when I bought that to do that, but we did not have the capacity to do it.
You might want to get on it because the software for that linear scanner may be out of date in 10 years.
It's still good. It's still good.
Anyway.
All right, yes, you know, we talked about, I mean, Kevin's made a recommendation that, you know, Ron start working on this, bring something back to the board, and then we will put something, try to find the funds somewhere. Would you prefer to leave some funds in the budget so that we have the ability? Just because the funds are there doesn't mean we have to spend it, okay? But at least the dollars are there, you know, to, you know, where you don't have to look to cannibalize something else possibly.
Is that CIT expenditure or it's not? So it'd be just something out of capital, out of general.
Yeah, I see it here.
Problem is, you don't have any idea what kind of number to throw in the budget. Whatever you know.
Well, the original, I think, for 30 to 16, well, what was it?
You've got two of them, one in engineering, and one in, Ron's office, so you've got $33,000.
Yeah.
I've actually got the vote for the I-plan table here, the one that Ron and engineering, which is under me, we're looking at. Let's look at that.
If we went with an alternate, we wouldn't need any of that. We've got the, I don't know what the software, I think it's Bluebeam software. I'm sure I can find this out tomorrow, but you guys know the number is before Thursday, and we just need to price a 45-inch monitor to do the reviews on it. Yeah, I don't think that's anything I couldn't get to.
It's up to the board at this point, you know, what do you want to do?
I'll just say that I support something in there. If you guys want to try to figure out what the best number is, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I figure $5,000's pretty close, or would be sufficient, or close enough. It's not going to be a big hiccup whenever they get to the final.
$33,000.
5,000.
5,000. Yeah.
Well,
5,000 for one. Now, if you're going to, I'm not sure I understand the engineering side of it. That's a whole other piece.
Right.
Well, engineer, the building department, engineer, and ideally operations all work in tandem to review certain applicants.
Right.
So you got your construction inspector, you got your building codes, you have, you know, now engineers, you know, city engineers, but also then potentially you can have the operations, you know, they're all in this, reviewing some level of plan. So that's why right now those two are in tandem together.
Well,
You've got that office reviewing, but you also have expectations.
but they're a subcontractor. In my mind, if we give them access to the
No,
server.
we're talking
Our
about,
construction inspector is in the engineering department, so that was not for Carver.
Oh, for the
that was
inspector.
for-
Right.
Yes.
This is, the one that we were asking for in engineering was really because of the need to review plans by the construction inspector. So, and frankly, for what it's worth, that's where the most need would be, is in the construction inspection.
Well, that's fine, but a 45-inch monitor will handle that too. If Ron can do it, the
I
inspector.
guess what we're saying, they're both the same, you're just doubling it, whether
Got
it's
it. Okay.
16,000
Got it.
or at 3,000.
Methodology of how it gets done, I think.
right, whatever it is, I'm
They
just
need to
trying to
figure
put
that out and bring
some,
it
leave
back.
some dollars in.
Yeah.
And so, $10,000, you don't, what
well, the one I planned you're proposing was 16.5, correct?
where we're, a total of 33,000.
It was 33 for the
Right.
two of them.
So
10 grand?
we
One.
need two, right?
Put
So,
10
you know,
grand.
for 10 grand?
Yeah.
Let's leave 10 grand in, 5 for, building and 5 for, engineering. Okay? All right, vehicle, what's the board's, decision on the vehicle? You want to replace the vehicle or not?
If you don't mind.
Sure.
I don't want to make a decision whether we should replace the vehicle or not. I think the most important thing we can do is we come up with a vehicle policy that we can all hopefully agree on. If we have to vote, and move on. This idea of, 2004 to 97 versus, 2017 with 110, that's a police officer's car. I think we need a fleet policy. And I don't mean a planned replacement policy. I mean, what I would recommend would be is there's some point in time, whether it's age or miles, either or, that a car needs to be looked at for potential replacement. If there's no real history, we're not using a lot of miles, if it's in good shape, well, we'll move that one more year out. But it keeps it in the capital plan, and it keeps it up at the top of the list or top of mind, okay? But this idea, we're very subjective, to honest. We've had this discussion for many years, and I would just suggest that we could probably get to a point where we don't have to have all these discussions about vehicles if we can come to an agreement on when we start looking at things and deciding that they're.
All the vehicles.
We had it presented to us, with the guidelines that Mike presented was 100,000 miles.
All the vehicles
Or
in
10
this
years.
budget for all departments follow vehicle fleet policy, practice, whatever you want to call it, which include the perimeter. At what time to replace, X, Y, Z. Mike can explain more than that. I know that they've done some updates to it with the departments, and he also did maintenance data for all the vehicles. So every vehicle here is part of that plan. Kevin's right. You've seen a draft of it over the past several years, but he's worked.
It's the same guidelines that he keeps presenting.
Right, so I'll go as deep as you guys want me to, but the basic guidelines are, we categorize vehicles into 3 sections: police, non-police, and specialized. Police, the basic guideline is six years or 100,000 miles. And that doesn't mean that at 6 years or 100,000 miles, we're gonna just say, okay, that's it, ship it down the road. It means that's when we're gonna start, unless something happens to it before then, that's when we're gonna start to assess it, start to look at it, start to make the decision whether or not we can get a few more miles out of it. If there's another vehicle that is only 4 years old, that has had tremendous more problems than the one that's 6 years old, then chief and the lieutenants are gonna flip that, and they're gonna bring the one that's got the most problems with you. But it's a guideline. For non-police, which includes, all of the building fleet, a lot of the parks fleet, a lot of some of the public works fleet, those vehicles are 10 years, 100,000 miles. So, again, same philosophy. You take the guideline, you evaluate it on a yearly basis. You move vehicles up and down based upon the wear and tear. Have they been in an accident? Those kind of factors. And then for specialized, the rule of thumb is 15 years or 100,000 miles. And so that's the basic unwritten rule guidelines that we live by, that we forecast with. And then I also, at the summer workshop, I was asked to come up with vehicle maintenance by vehicle, which was a job, but I got it done.
That was my request.
So I have that. I can pass these out if you guys want to see them. But I have that down to by vehicle. And then I also broke it out. I've got it categorized by this is how much maintenance we spent on the specialized type, the police type, the non-police type. So if you guys want that information, I have it.
But that
You need that
led to
info
that.
to evaluate, we don't.
One of the reasons I'm actually the one who brought that up at the strategic planning session was you can look at basics, 6 years, 100,000 miles, et cetera, but that doesn't give us the true aspect of how much money we're actually spending on this vehicle annually. That 6-year-old car with less than 100,000 miles, we may have spent 10 grand on it last year because it needed new transmission and new this and that. I said that was part of the whole, okay, let's look at a more general picture of, yes, we've got the year and mileage guideline, but like he's saying, we need to look at it vehicle by vehicle on what is that vehicle costing us to maintain due to issues it may be having. So like with Ron's request here, I was kind of confused there thinking, oh, it's not even 100,000 miles yet, but that's a 2004. In 3 years, that's going to be considered an actual antique. That's a 20-year cutoff. So really, that starts making me think, okay, repair work, parts,
Yeah.
it's really pushing that where that's going to be double what we think on a new vehicle because it's going to be so much harder to find those parts. So that's why I was completely thinking, mileage isn't that bad. Years ago, kind of made me think it's going to be due for some major upkeep. So to what you were speaking earlier is,
Yeah, I think, I just personally, I'm not at 100,000 miles. I don't think that's the right number. I think 10 years is too early too, but that's the policy that I think we need to get to and all get aligned on, or at the very least, come to an agreement as a majority and move on.
Vehicle
Okay?
plan.
Right. So with that said, I don't know that I support or don't support. I'm not
So,
saying we should take it out yet.
so you've got a breakdown per vehicle. Can you pinpoint on that list, this vehicle in specific? And then once
Absolutely.
further on the list to say, okay, FYI, in the last 5 years, this is what we spent on maintenance on this vehicle.
Yeah, so, and I only went back 5 years, I went back to 2017, so obviously this vehicle is much older than that. I didn't go back any
That's fine.
further than that. So for the 5 years that I tracked, the vehicle he's wanting to get rid of next year, we spent, $2,252.15 on.
In 5 years,
So not bad.
On maintenance over that 5-year period.
$400 a year.
So that's holding up well.
It is.
But like I said, there could be another vehicle on the list where, guess what, we spent 10 grand.
I agree.
So
But you're also at a point, like you said,
it's going to start costing us money, a lot.
Well, I do think it is important, even though this is very operational, and I know we have stuck to some standards, but if every budget, we're gonna disagree on what staff standards are or what alderman standards, we do our capital planning on these plans. We do our forecasting on these plans. Departments say, okay, these are my vehicles, this is what it's supposed to look like, this is what's up. I would encourage the board, if you wanna get, if these are not appropriate standards to go by, then please direct staff as a majority of what standards we should, because we do have this conversation every year. And we are going by standards. We are going by a parameter for every department on class of vehicle. And if that parameter needs change, then it would help Mike, because he really is the one that does the legwork with the departments on this, but
the only difference
staff would
is,
like that.
the only difference, Gina, is those are not parameters, those are guidelines.
Well, or
And
guidelines.
there's a big difference in it,
Right,
and
and
those are
like Mike
guidelines that Mike is using.
And Mike
And-
said,
and
we've
not
had police
parameters.
cars that's hit 2 or 3 deer. It is no way in those guidelines, but because we have already replaced XYZ because of deer, or what was happening at Culver's the other night, then we're like, you know what, this gonna
Transfer this.
You know, so we do go by the guidelines, you're right, that's a better word, but if those guidelines every are not gonna be suitable, then the board does need to get
Correct.
together and direct and direct staff on what guidelines we need to be going by.
These guidelines have been discussed over and over again. They have not been changed. Right now, they are applicable. If the board doesn't like it, let's change it. But right now, these are the guidelines, and, you know, we need to, you know, make the decisions, you know, based on that, using them, you know, as guidelines.
On board.
But there's another thing too that I think we need to keep in mind is that as these vehicles, as the departments start looking at these vehicles, they're also looking at, you know, as they start getting close to these guidelines, you know, do they continue to spend, you know, maintenance dollars on them? You know, if it's appropriate, tires and so on and so forth. It doesn't buy you anything when you get ready to sell. You know, it doesn't give you back the dollars that you've invested in some of those features. So, you know, keeping that in mind, I guess, Mike, you know, you say that this vehicle would have come up for consideration. If it came up for consideration, what was the consideration? Was there, based on, you know, your evaluation of this vehicle, was it that it should be replaced? Or it should be held over and not replaced at this time?
Are we talking about the?
We're talking about
Building
the
department
Ford
vehicle?
Explorer. Or I guess-
Because of the age of the vehicle, Ron and I felt when we reviewed it, that it should probably be replaced, yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Keep going.
I would like to make the motion that we follow the guidelines that Mike just presented as the guidelines used for staff to recommend vehicle replacement.
May I make a comment, sir?
Sure.
I want to emphasize what Kevin just said, that it's a guideline. Remember that no matter what, we've got to bring the vehicle to the board for approval. So if you put the guideline in place, then we simply continue along the path that we are doing on reviewing these vehicles and making those little changes from year to year based upon what the chief's fleet looks like, or what Kevin's fleet looks like, or what Nicole's fleet looks like. But we still have to bring it to the board for final approval. And so I think putting the guideline in place at least solidifies staff that we have something that is in place, we have a guideline that we're going by, and we don't have this kind of uneasiness kind of over us on whether or not we should ever bring a vehicle
to the board for consideration.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. All in further discussion? Yes,
I would just like to ask on the guidelines as far as the age of the vehicle. I mean, are we gonna put how many years?
we got it,
It's
10
on
years.
10?
They've got it broken down into 3 categories that he identified. Police vehicles, non-police vehicles, and specialized
I
vehicles.
understand, but
And this particular vehicle will fall in the second category, which would be 10 years or 100,000 miles.
The police
When
would
we
be
start
6
reviewing.
years,
okay,
and then the special vehicles would be 15 years.
Correct.
okay. Thank you.
All right, any other further discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion approved? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, we have 4 in favor, 1 nay, it passes. Now, this vehicle, what is the direction of the board on replacing this vehicle? Do I have a motion to replace the
I'll
vehicle?
make a motion to
We
replace.
have a motion
And I
to,
want to clarify that though, is once again, deferring to the people that are more knowledgeable about the vehicle, and in this case, my concern is the age. Is 17-year-old vehicle is definitely in play because that is going to start costing us money for replacement and repair. But I make a motion to replace the vehicle as.
we have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Morose, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that vehicle's going to move forward. All right, let's move on to building maintenance.
Oh, sorry. I was like, building maintenance, run. No, other than the personnel overall sections we'll discuss later. There were a couple comments on building maintenance and O&M, so if there's any specific questions, we can start there. If not, Ron will go through any questions on the building maintenance capital. And the capital refer to the new list. There was an addition of a sidewalk improvement that was included
In the new sheet that was just handed out tonight.
in the new sheet in front of you, and at the bottom, which was included in the original one, there was a requested project, which is the parking lot, with the updated quote from the engineers that is also at the bottom that didn't make it into the draft and probably needs discussed whether or not you want to include it or keep it next year.
All right, Ron?
If you want me to go through them line by line?
Well, let's first off ask if anybody has any questions on anything that's being proposed here, any concerns? Yes.
Question.
Alderman Becker.
What do the bathroom upgrades consist of?
The bathroom upgrades are, make sure that's the right one, yeah, $13,200. That's for the upper level. All of our bathrooms, at least a portion of them, if not the entire bathroom, is wallpaper. And the wallpaper we've been trying to maintain over the years by trying to tuck the corners and glue them back, but it's getting to the point where we can't salvage it. So this is to remove all of the wallpaper texture and paint as we did the lobby a few years ago.
Wait, 20 seems expensive.
With just removing wallpaper and then painting?
Removing the wallpaper, yes, texturing and painting. That's for the bathrooms, the 2 sets of the 2 bathrooms on administration, the lobby, and the 4 restrooms on the PD side.
So there's like 6 rooms or something?
8 restrooms.
6 or 8, yeah.
8, 2, 4, 6,
Yes.
8.
And in this, when I say this bathroom, it would be that entryway too, going into each of the men's and women's.
I think I'm going to business.
I thought you were only talking 2.
Nobody wants to
It's
do
not
that.
8 for 13 years.
Yeah, it's not that high when you're removing wallpaper and you're texturing your paint. I'm not certain how well texture and paint's gonna do in the bathroom, but
That's about $1,500 per bathroom.
yeah, it's not high.
That's
You're saying it's not high.
$1,500 per bathroom to take down the wallpaper.
Any other question?
Yeah, that's.
There's no use going over and discussing each one of them unless you have questions.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Richard?
The sidewalk entrance. So is that the steps out here where we're starting to see degradation on the steps and so forth? I'm just trying to understand the scope of this.
It's everything from, we've got the 2 light poles on either side there, all the way up. It's not replacement. This is just to go in and it's an alternative to mud jacking. Concrete weighs 100 pounds per square foot. This polystyrene, it's basically like an expanding foam, a few pounds per square foot. What we've discovered is that we have had settling and washout underneath the sidewalks. We have hollow portions underneath there. Pretty much every section has been checked and has a hollow spot. That's why we're starting to see movement. What this would do would be go in, stabilize all of those sections out front, and then make the repairs to any corners that have come off, and then seal all of the joints.
Okay. Have we got any preliminary pricing on just taking the steps out and repouring concrete the last 20 years? Because very few repairs last well that I've tried.
No, I have not. I haven't went after that.
I don't disagree we need to stabilize it, but potentially if we rip it out, we can stabilize it while we're ripping it out more. But as far as this being in here, maybe that the price needs to be adjusted over time. I think we need to do something. I agree with that. I just need to understand the scope. That's all I have.
Other questions from any of the other aldermen? All right, there was one other item that was left off, and Gina made reference to it. The City Hall parking lot, is that what you were referencing?
Yeah, there's 3 items, one of which is in this department, we'll get to the park, and I do believe, the department should explain those. I don't, in any means, I took them out just to keep up with the parameters of past budget comments, but I do believe the department should explain that, and the board make decisions on whether to add them back. I don't want it to look like because I took them out, I don't feel they're a priority. I want the board to make that choice.
That discussion about not using CIT money for general was because at the time, there was a focus on paying off bonds. That is not part of something we can do now, paying off them roads. So I'm not sure that the board still has that same opinion last year at that time. I did not feel that was something that was meant to be a go forward position always. So I support using CIT money for certain items that we can by law and that we want to out of general revenue things. I support that.
Well, that's why I bring it to your attention. So, Ron, we do have an updated quote. If you can answer it.
Yes, I got this updated quote from Cochran Engineering. It's the same proposal I've proposed the last few years. This one includes, at their recommendation, the pavement sealing of what I call the rear lot, or where the PD and the ambulance, the lot that they use. That's a $4,000 additive, but this is a 2-inch pavement mill, 2-inch asphalt overlay for all of the parking lot from the PD around to the employee entrance back here in restriping. Included in this bid, we would also bring the accessible parking spaces up to ADA regulations, which they currently are not.
So Ryan, you're looking at the 138,000 plus 4,000 more?
No, sir,
That includes the 4,000?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
138,220.
What's the board's desire on adding the parking lot, city parking lot?
Can I ask a couple of questions before I answer that question?
Sure. That's why I'm asking, what's the board's desire?
The $962,000 that we're projecting at year end for restricted general fund, is all of that the ARPA quote, Biden money, all of that?
All but no, it's not all of it, 20 or 30,000.
But most 95% of it is. Okay,
Right.
fair enough.
And I do plan, after we get through budget, to plan a strategic work session with the board. We can explain the interim rule. I'm working on kind of putting together with some details from staff on what recommendations that would fit. There are a few things in this budget. We can get to sewer, particularly water sewer. Transportation things are not included. Now, there are some legislation changes that we hear maybe might change that, but nothing's been voted on at the federal level to change that yet. So no, absolutely no transportation. In my opinion, this parking lot would not fit the bill. Now, in my opinion,
It would not today.
Not today.
in my
Not today.
opinion, though, the 2 park that we'll get to potentially could. But I just want to make sure I have know that bill in and out, and I'm not comfortable. At this time with budget and the timing, I was uncomfortable to put that in front of you at the same time. But long story short, with this particular one, I do not see that it fits it. So that's why.
If we take that position, okay, and we put this in our budget this way, as long as we haven't done the project, if the ARP money guidelines all of a sudden in a couple months make it clear that it does fall under there, we can do it. We can move it from there to the ARP.
It actually doesn't matter about whether or not you've done the project. It has to fit in a certain date range, whether or not it's done. So
Yeah, that's what I mean.
let's just say a parking lot or park improvements, we're gonna call them park, because park improvements are in certain capacities available.
That's what I'm trying to
And we
get
get it done and then we do strategic, you can go back and reimburse.
Right, so we can,
But you're also gonna find that we're going to be addressing, several
right,
things that are unquestionably ARPA, categories.
we should move forward, that this is not an ARP.
Exactly.
Once the guidelines come, we could all of a sudden reevaluate some of those things.
Yeah, right now there are preliminary guidelines. We were at a meeting the other day at Council of Local Governments. We had representatives from some of the senators and from our federal representatives. They are trying to put out final guidelines, and quite frankly, some of them said we may never see them.
What we got's probably gonna be fine.
We have to look at what you have.
But timing wise, I just wasn't gonna be able to cross that bridge for you all for budget, and so that's why I restricted them.
But one of the things that we can do is that, like for instance, the City Hall parking lot, $138,000, we can use CIT funds for that, okay? So, the question is, do we want to do this project? And then the question would be, do we want to fund it with CIT funds? So again, I've opened it for comments. Richard's commented. Richard, do you have any additional comments?
That was a question, so I do have some comments. I don't support it coming out of CIT at this point. We have an opportunity long-term for CIT to do something a lot bigger than we've ever imagined in the city. And it's a slippery slope when we start grabbing $150,000 here and $150,000 there over time, that we're gonna limit ourselves to some of those things. The parking lot, I asked Ron, we haven't got any potholes. I don't know that I haven't walked it, but there was nothing that I heard that said, hey, we've got emerging potholes and we're gonna spend money on it and so forth. And until we kind of get our long-range strategic plan, I don't see the compelling need. If someone wanted to say, let's leave in the budget if we can use ARPA funds, I'm all in, okay? That's the best way to spend the ARPA funds. And I know that's a bigger discussion too, okay? But personally, I'm not supporting at this point until we have a broader discussion around where we're headed with this $10 million eventually, CIT, and what we might or may not be able to do with that. A parking lot that doesn't have a compelling need, while we can afford it, I don't disagree. I think that we should get a better plan together before we decide we should start chipping away at that number already.
Other comments? Phyllis?
I think that.
Phyllis, I'm sorry, I've corrected you.
I'm sorry.
Just a second.
I'm sorry, I wish I would have brought the last few years in the budget thing, because I distinctly remember that the parking lot we were looking at in the past of looking like $80,000 to $85,000.
Yeah, it started out that way, Phyllis.
I'm sorry,
It started out at that number.
is that right?
Yeah.
Right.
And at that time, I wasn't in favor of spending that kind of money, and now it's 138.
It's probably not gonna go down.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, it's probably not gonna go down. These numbers are provided by Cochrane. And it's their best estimate on material prices and quantities, so I don't know these numbers. These
So
are what
5
they
years
provided.
ago, it probably very much
Yeah.
started.
well, even less than that. I mean, I just distinctly remember that. I thought, my God, that's a lot of money for that parking lot, but it still doesn't look that bad, and now I'm looking at 138. So it's because of the product cost, is that what you're saying?
But our engineers in Cochrane started that, or our engineers started
We
5
started
years
internally.
ago.
Right.
And I
That
think
number
it
was
was,
never high.
I'm sorry?
The number was never high enough to start with. It was gonna cost you
Right,
$125,000.
yeah. It was an unrealistic number at the time.
We were never gonna get it done for $85,000.
Not the work that we were wanting.
So
well, that was
it's a
provided by
combination
our
of pricing
design
and
engineers
the
that
board.
provided
Okay.
our estimate. Stacy put those numbers together, and she was very close on our city project, so I can't imagine that she would have been, either way, I mean, I don't know, this is my
Were we gonna do the 2-inch mill and do all of that as part of it?
Yep.
So,
Oh, wait,
Years
the
per se.
15,000, we weren't gonna do she did not put in there for the ADA improvements, which is to the tune of 15,000.
Other questions or comments?
Well, I don't have any problem with CIT money. I think we need to utilize the funds that we have to continue to replace and improve and do the things that we need to do today to keep the city looking good, being a vibrant city. I think we need to continue on. I don't have any problem with spending the CIT money in the general revenue area that is applicable by the law that allows us to do that. And we can't let everything not be done that should be done just to push it off for something that we don't even know what the projects are in the future. We need to maintain what we have today before we start doing stuff in the future. And that's I don't have any problem with that. The parking lot looks bad. We have an image, and I think that's the thing I've expressed over and over, that of what the image that parking lot looks like. And I think it's time we replace it.
Anyone else? I would say from an image standpoint, I would say from an image standpoint. Well, I asked and no one's raised their hand, so, okay. I was just starting to make a comment. It's, look around at the parking lots in our city, the businesses and the parking lots that they have, and how many of them look like this? That's just a comment. The question is, now we've put the question
A lot
on the
of
floor.
them, if I can answer that, a lot of them.
Yeah.
The outlet mall looks worse. Okay.
Well, you also have an outlet mall that's up.
I understand, but the point is that it's still functional, and I'm not saying that, and so I'm not saying we're closing up shop, but my point is about functionality. And there was an objective that we put in here, and that was to optimize asset lives, because I do believe we need to maintain things, Kevin. I don't disagree, all right? But it's just recently even got in the capital plan, and the way, the vision, if you will, long term is that we're not having discussions about parking lots and other things, okay? We've got reserves, okay? But we've got to get a capital plan that has a reserve set up so that we don't have a whoopsie $700,000 911 thing where we got to go to the bank and go borrow money. But until we get that capital plan together, or we use ARPA funds, which we aren't going to plan for, okay, for this or something like that, then we're going to continue to have these discussions. And I would rather not have those discussions. I'd rather know that whether it's $500,000 a year that we're going to use over a 5-year period for maintaining our stuff, or $1 million a year, or $200,000 a year, we shouldn't be having these, because honestly, the capital plan should dictate those. And then the only discussion we would have is about additional capital.
Can I make a comment on the capital plan?
Yeah.
We are using a capital plan. I have a capital plan that, you guys, same thing with the fleet plan, that we work with departments, and through now, I think Mike may go out to 2029, but I do a 2027 snapshot. This parking lot, I have moved from column to column, so all the departments, everything we know we've owned is on that plan. Some things may not show up in a 5-year because they're 10 years out, but I go by a plan, and then I say, okay, well, if next year we have $300,000, this year it's $800,000, I take that average from a rolling 5-year period and say, okay, how much do I need to make sure that's in my, again, a reverse, what I called last night, a reverse annuity that has an inflation factor and an interest factor that changes annually, to make sure that I'm putting in a pot enough that we can pull out from the pot. And this year's pot is around 800-something thousand for the general fund, because the other funds have a separate plan. So I do go by a plan. If it's not a plan that you guys like, again, operationally, I'll give you all the detail, but I do go by a plan. So I put money in and I take money out, so.
The comments that I made last night about the capital plan, of course, I haven't seen the new and updated one, okay? But I will tell you that I went through the list of capital items here, and those that were non-replacement items, I don't think there were more than 20% of them that were in that plan, okay? And Mike and I had the discussion today, and I threw one out there, the roof on the building. He wasn't sure the roof on the building is in that capital plan. We need to have that. Now, I realize that we don't need every chair, okay, or every piece of carpet,
Anything under.
but we have to maintain all these things, to your point, okay? And if we keep doing this in a hodgepodge way, we're gonna continue having these discussions. But we can get a whole lot closer than I have in most of these discussions if we can get to a capital plan that we feel is thorough, as complete as possible. It'll never be perfect, and that we've made accommodations for all of these things, okay? There's nothing in there about a Sally Port area. There's nothing in there, not the one I'm looking at now. Again, you said there's a different one and I haven't seen it yet, okay? There's nothing there about HVAC, okay? There's nothing there about grace. Maybe now, what's in there predominantly that I saw, other than a couple of departments that were pretty thorough, was all the emerging stuff since we started the plan, okay? And we have tracked those, and I agree that that's a plan, but it's not a comprehensive plan, okay?
It's not a comprehensive plan, the fact that we don't have what we think we need to buy new. Now, I will go back to the details. Where's the roof? I don't know, maybe the roof's so far down the line. That's why I look at it as a 5-year rolling. I know Ron knows the roof needs to be replaced. Now, as far as the HVAC and pumps, there were. Now, you were correct, the very first one, Richard, that this was new. There were things that needed to be added, but we, over the last 24 months, have even perfected. So everything that we know we own. Now, rebuilding City Hall, you're not gonna find that on there. You're not. But again, I look at a rolling 5 years. Mike may do a rolling 9 years, but he sets down with the department. So you're not gonna find expansion that we don't know we need, but this parking lot, tower, the well, we redid the well, so we have perfected it. Back years, I'm not gonna say there wasn't stuff on there, but we have perfected it. But that's where that capital planning piece of the reserve specifically comes from. And that will vary from year to year. As we change our rolling 5 to 8 years, the roof's gonna come around. Just like the rolling 10 years for transportation, City Parkway, total overlay is gonna come around, and then it's gonna roll off, and then it's gonna come around again. So I disagree with your comment that we don't follow a plan, we do.
Oh, I think we follow our plan. My point is our capital plan's not complete, okay? That's what I'm trying to say, okay? I think it's as complete it's more complete than it's ever been, but it's not 90% complete. I mean, what my instinct, the plan that I have that you shared with me is a maybe 20% complete in my mind, okay? I think we need to get to 80 or 90%, and I think if you do that, you will find that these numbers are different unless your current plan is hugely significant than the one that I have, okay? And that is a trust and verify. I trust what you're saying. I just like to verify that, okay? It's a spreadsheet, right? It was a spreadsheet. It used to be a spreadsheet. That's what I have.
Mike probably has the most master's coffee that he works with the department. So.
We can get that stat so forward to the board so you can take a look at it.
I don't know that the board was ever getting, I asked for it specifically to get it a couple of years ago, and that's.
At budget time is about the time.
So it may have went out to the whole board, but I know I got it from him.
I said we can get a copy of it to the board.
He was asking.
I was just asking,
Right, and if I'm gonna send it to one, I'm gonna send it to the whole
No
board.
problem.
Correct.
Okay,
I guess
and some of you can look at it if you want. If you don't want to, that's up to you. Yes.
Just one comment. I've only been to this board for a year, but I know that this parking lot has been brought up a dozen times. So obviously the discussion regarding the parking lot predate me and my tenure on this board. It does sound like we just keep kicking the can down the road regarding what to do about the parking lot, but I'm going to defer to the majority rule on this because you guys obviously have bigger issues with it than I do. I just know if it's something you've been talking about for years, you need to act on it and stop. Once again, keep pushing it back year over year.
So you have something?
Two things. One is, Gina, not that I expect you to do it by the time the capital plan comes out, but as a suggestion, I had a capital plan with the fire district. I put, and I don't remember the number, but I put X number of dollars in every year for new stuff. Didn't know what that stuff was, but new stuff. Because there's gonna be new stuff come up every year, in the police department that we didn't think about today that is a hot topic. I mean, who 5 years ago knew that body cameras were gonna be a hot topic, that was gonna be a necessity? So that might be a suggestion. The other thing is, Bob, following your comments on this parking lot, I think what the problem is that it comes down to is how much value or how much you put on cosmetic and how much you put on looks. Ron brings up a point this year that we've never had put before us, and that is, if we're not gonna do the parking lot, we need to make it ADA compliance. I have no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I don't know what it's gonna take to do that, and I don't know if it's reasonable to not do anything except make it ADA compliant, but we definitely need to make it ADA compliant. And I support doing the whole parking lot.
We don't have to do ADA compliance if we don't do the parking lot, right? That, we just are gonna do that while we're there, which is a good sound
Yes.
approach, is that right?
The federal government does require that public buildings and public facilities provide ADA compliance regardless of cost. They don't make concessions for that. And if there's ever
So
a
we've
change
been
in the
non-compliant for 20 years, or since 1994 when it went in place?
I've never checked the slope of the parking or the ramp there since I've been here. Copper did. And they said, you're not ADA compliant, this has to be redone.
So over the last, and I'm gonna get the year wrong, there is a federal, I hate to use the word mandate, but there is a requirement for all public buildings and public areas to be ADA accessible. And I'm researching because this kind of fell into my lap and I started Mike and Ron and Cochran in my help in this. But one of the things that our previous engineer did discuss on the transportation side was certain roads, before you did certain amount of work, had to have current, we use sidewalks as an example, ADA accessible by 2027. So in talking with MoDOT recently, just with the TAC and some projects coming up, you know, it was like, oh, how's the city coming on that? Like, oh my gosh. So I started researching it. Transportation issue, that's, you know, sidewalks, we'll get to that. But in that research, the cities are over 50 employees are supposed to have ADA transition plans. We can't find an ADA transition plan for our city. And so I've recently got Ron and Mike and Cochran and whatever level involved. It's like, okay, we need to do an audit of our city to figure out, have a plan to get all public access accessible ADA. That's talking about park, city hall, airports, public works, sidewalks, whatever that is. And so in that conversation, that's where, of course, Ron's done as much, if not more, research on this than I am because it affects his on buildings. So I don't have like what that's going to look like, but we as a city have got to make a priority, and we are internally to get a transition plan, not just on the public right of ways, but our property. And so he said, well, that fits perfect because Cochran said our facility here. So it doesn't matter whether we do the parking lot or all. And I can't find anything with 2027 date as I was told by MoDOT, but either way, we are working on our requirements. That was a bill that was passed. I can't tell you what year because I'm still trying to figure out, get my bearings so I know what's expected of us so we're not surprised later. So shorter answer is it doesn't matter whether we redo the parking lot or not. We are supposed to have, by a certain time, a plan and or action for ADA accessibility for all people. And we have 50 more employees, so that's the private side's 50 more employees.
Well, that could be a huge number if it all has to be done by 2027. If the plan has to be in place by 27, you got 20 years to get there. That's a difference.
We're still figuring out all our requirements.
Another reason to be cautious about where we spend money.
Still to be determined. But the short answer is no, we are not supposed to wait just because we redo the parking lot. It should be already.
Let's get the parking lot resolved. What is the will of the board? What do you want to do with the parking lot? Do I have a motion to move forward? We don't have a motion to move forward, so the parking lot dies for lack of a motion. How about the other items that are being proposed for the building maintenance, which does include?
I was still thinking a little bit, you can move.
All right, I'm sorry. Well, you know, I looked
I
around.
would like to make the
Nobody
motion.
was
I was
making.
looking around, I'm sorry, I was
Okay.
contemplating how to make the motion because are we moving forward? Well, I will make a motion that we proceed with the parking lot. then we proceed with the parking lot. You wanna know how we're gonna fund it? You wanna know, we have that in motion? That's why I was trying to, you went rather quickly on me, sorry.
Right, sorry, didn't intend to. Well, I mean, you can go either way. We can talk about, doing the parking lot, and if it's the direction of the board, you can also propose, since it is not currently, funded, and we know that CIT funding is available, you can propose, funding it that way, or you can propose that we, fund it another manner, or you can suggest that, staff bring, back by at Thursday's meeting, a proposal for, if the board decides to move forward with the parking lot, how the staff recommends that we fund it. So you
I
have
think
three
we
options.
should, I think we should do the parking lot and I guess let staff bring back, but my suggestion is I don't have any problem with using CIT for John.
Okay. So it's your motion,
I make a motion, we do the parking lot.
okay? And that staff bring back a recommendation for its funding at Thursday's meeting,
Do it that way.
okay? Do I have a second on that motion? We have a first, we do not have a second, it dies for lack of a second. Let's move back on to building maintenance then. We discussed all of the items. One thing that was added was the City Hall sidewalk entrance. Is there anything you want to remove? And if so, what is it? So we can, pass on the others. Does anybody want to remove anything? Okay, so it's the board's decision to move forward with it. Then let me just ask for a motion to accept the capital items recommended for building maintenance. Do I have a motion for that?
I so move.
Alderman Morone, do I have a second? Okay, it was got Bob. Any further comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, that's taken care of. Move on to parks.
The parks.
Let's do this, it's 6:30, does everyone want to take about a 5-minute break and?
Thank you.
Yeah, and then we'll come back to the parks.
Chocolate.
All right, we're back on. Gina?
All right, parks. So park expenses start on page 40. Same thing here, they do have a change in employee count. I think Nicole explained that, some part-timers moved to full-time. I guess we could just start with that, and then any O&M questions before we move to capital.
Go.
Is the professional service, is that this master plan we were talking about?
Yes.
And can we, what is this master plan?
Okay.
Because I've heard a couple different things of what it's supposed to be,
From
and
like 20 years ago.
I know what that one is. So what I've heard, is it a master plan telling us where we need, swing sets, or we need more, or whatever, or is it just a plan that tells us that our infrastructure need changes, like drainage and water and dot. That's where I'm
What's the scope
confused.
that Crawford?
So I spoke to Cochran initially, and then I called them earlier today to kind of just review everything with them and kind of go through everything. So the $30,000 master plan would have several focuses. One of the most important focuses would be looking at expanding revenue options in the park. So there would be certainly a piece where we would look at all of the fee structure that we have in the park. We would look at park expansion, whether that be in our current park or elsewhere. We would look at also, as you said, other services, whether that be playgrounds, green space, additional parking, whatever it may be. It would be very comprehensive. There would be the word's escaping me right now, but a conceptual drawing of it. It would include input from staff, surveys that we have done or surveys that we will do during the process, and kind of bring that all together into a guideline that would provide a plan over a number of years, quotes for whatever improvements that we include in there over a number of years. It's essentially all-encompassing. But one of the main focuses would be on identifying if there is a way for us to increase revenue through adding baseball, soccer, whatever it may be, in addition to reviewing the current ordinance that dictates all of the fees that we have and kind of going through all that. I know that we've had the soccer discussion, and I think there will be some of that in there to discuss whether or not that is viable with the current parks that we have, or whether that is something that we need to look outside of the current two parks that we have. So it's all going to be included. And just to close on that, Cochran has essentially told me that if this gets approved, they have a number of ones they've already done that they would send me and Nicole and the rest of our staff to kind of give us a feel for how we want to move forward. So that's the summary on that.
I thought it was.
So it's gonna be more than just a infrastructure update.
Right, that's what I wanted to make sure.
Right.
Is there any other questions on O&M before she heads in to explain her employee count change request?
Okay, one real quick one. Were we predominantly short-staffed in the parks? And there may have been a note in your original email in the parks this year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know we're adding head count, but also the $60,000 isn't, maybe it's $50,000.
Yeah.
I didn't figure it was just head count.
We had several vacancies that turned out.
It's the only question I have.
That's on temps, correct?
What?
Temps? Summer.
Well, we had parks manager, the rec specialist, and a tech So we had vacancies in all three of those positions this year.
To piggyback on that, if I don't mind, you did a great job coming in when you came in, and I know Mike helped a lot, and Mike, you deserve some credit here too, but what you guys were able to accomplish at the parks this year, with the turnover that we had and the timing of that turnover was nothing short of phenomenal. So thank you very much and great job.
All right, employee count changes a little bit. There you go.
So I gave you some numbers in the back of what our summer, spring, fall hours, and some of the fall is not even in here yet. We pretty much have filled up summer already for the next year. Every weekend, besides the main holiday weekends, are taken sites. I think there's 2 weekends in June that have not filled. August is still far out, so they will come to me as tournaments start to evolve and tournament directors want more money. That's what it comes down to. So I put together how many hours outside of the 8 to 5 range that needs to be covered. So those hours are crucial for us to be there. We, all of us sling hot dogs to fixing whatever at the park. It's not just limited to just our park techs or whatever. So when these tournaments happen, we are forced to be inside that concession to help cover. We don't have enough concession. The liability that comes, not liability, being reliable, having reliable staff to be there every day is tough, especially if you have young kids. It's late nights, it's a lot of money that's being handled there. So there's a lot of issues that, you need somebody there to help supervise. You also need somebody to help supervise parents, umpires, any issues that have come up. There's been several issues that have happened throughout the park that once I took over, and as I was a recreational specialist, that I wake up to every day that there's these problems, and if somebody was there, it could have eliminated quickly. And so what happens is I cover majority of it, and I'm in there all the time. And it's not just about me, it's also about giving my staff time off too, because it becomes 4 staff Monday through Sunday, besides the 40 hours, or we'll have to alleviate, and then we take away 2 days out of the week where we can get park work done, and we're putting them in a concession stand to sling hot dogs. So this is where it's coming from. It's just to help alleviate some of that and not put so much on our 4 full-time staff that we're there every day. So the numbers that I put together are the hours that are usually spent at the park. Tournaments, it varies. It could even be longer some nights because of rain delays or extra innings or whatever it might be. So this could give and take. It also could give and take due to weather. So I don't want you to think this is set in stone. On the back, this is about the hours that we put in this year's 525 outside of the 8 to 5 time range. So this is all 5 to whatever, 10:30, usually 11 with slow pitch. And then in the weekends, it just varies tournament to tournament and what's coming in. So we have to make sure people are there covering, fixing the needs. We have bathroom issues that come up, trash, all those things, you guys know. I'm just trying to explain why I'm looking for that. The other thing is too, our seasonals do not come in until May, mid-May, depending on when college is over with. So we already are starting full-blown in March, trying to get things ready. Tournaments are, all of April is completely booked. So we have not only league that we're prepping for, but we also have tournaments that we need our 4 staff members there to cover, and plus concession as well. So that's kind of, and then, the big thing is, I'm sure, is what will they do in the winter? Well, I provided you a list. I'm sorry for the long paper. That was copier decided it was longer paper than needed, but I provided you a list of things that could be done, but we have to kind of put some of these items to the back burner. We have to face what's in front of us and get it, make sure the face of the park looks good. And then these other projects kind of have to be put to the side, or if there's another day where we can do it and we've caught up with what we need during the week. So, if I pull a guy mowing takes, with our mowers right now, it takes 3 days to do the city park, inside, outside. And it takes 2 days at Peanut Park, inside, outside. So that pulls away, so the other things can't happen. If there's fixing repairs on a lot of our equipment, which we'll explain later it might need 2 people, so now you're pulling 2 people, which one could be mowing and helping supervise, to fix an equipment, or whatever it might be. So now we're down another person where we could send somebody else out. And it's also to alleviate some, give that chance for them to actually have a weekend in the summer. That is not really an option. It wasn't for me at all. The only time it happened was when it rained. So there was no family time or anything like that. So that's the reason.
So can I add a couple of things?
Yeah.
So there's one sheet in here that I want to bring your all's attention to. So as Nicole stated, and she lives by this, if we don't have the help, guess who's doing it? Right here, okay? I lived it as well. And so I thought it was important that we let you guys know, these are the bi-weekly hours that your park manager puts in the summer. So in general terms, a salaried manager is expected to work around 90 hours a week. Around 45 hours a week, 90 hours bi-weekly, just in general terms. But when you're in the park, that kind of goes out the window. You gotta do what you gotta do to make sure that everything happens. And if you go down through here, you can see that Nicole has truly put in some incredible hours. And it causes stress and burnout on our manager. We have to be able to give her some more help, especially earlier in the year, as she stated, before we get to that point where we finally have seasonals to come in. And then I can't say it enough. This is a list of things that need to get done at our park. These items need to be done year round. We have the work for this extra person year round. There is no doubt about this. And for what it's worth, this is just a start. There's more beyond this every year that comes up. So the only other thing I will add is, if you will remember, we did eliminate this position, I think 3 or 4 years ago. So at one point we did have that park tech. So we lived it without it for a while, and now we are to the point where it's like, okay, well, now we understand why we had it in the first place. So
Let me add to that, because that was, what we did was we took away full-time, added more part-time. Now we're asking to kind of go the other way around, go back the other way. So we didn't eliminate our idea was we were gonna add the hours for more part-timers. Markets change, that's harder to do, so we need more full-time dedicated.
Would that explain why we're adding a full-time person, but the full-time equivalent is just a quarter of a person more? Is that was where I was trying to connect the dots.
Changes the hours, but yes, that would be it.
So how are you getting a full person out of here if the full-time equivalent's only one?
Well, I mean, you may still end up with a few more hours, but yeah.
You're reducing part-time.
We need more dedicated.
Any question on personnel? And the need for the additional spot? All right.
So capital, again, I would refer you to my updated exclusive capital list. Parks, there are 2 things that I incorrectly put on the sheet. The mower replacement, that's actually 2 mowers, replacing 2 mowers. That's the 3rd line down, the 61-inch mower replacement. I should have had 2 by there.
Bring in 2 mowers for that cost.
Yeah, so the 28,000 is really for 2 items, not just one. It implies one because I didn't add the right number. And then the other thing that I did, if you notice, 2 of the items that were not included in draft 1 that I think that need dedicated discussion are the 2 parking lots, rehab improvements, additions, one at Phoenix, one at Osage Beach City Park. The pickleball courts go directly with the Osage Beach parking addition. So, and I know Nicole can explain that, but I pulled out the parking lot not knowing if the parking lot doesn't happen, it's not financially feasible because it was going to be one big project. They just separated out the 2 pieces to that. So it doesn't, you don't add the parking lot back in, the pickleball will be removed anyway. They need to go in tandem together. And I Did not realize that from the notes from the department, and that, I apologize for that. The two items that are not included in the budget that I do want the department to give information on, because I do think they should be a priority, along with the pickleball courts and along with the lake access culvert box. All four of those do fit the parameters of CIT, just FYI. There is no CIT scheduled in the budget. The box culvert, which I know they're gonna explain, this is the ongoing issue that we have went back and forth with that floods. It does need to be replaced. We've went different ideas. The transportation department over the past few years have fixed it the best they can. But that is definitely a road infrastructure issue for lake access. So with that, I will turn it over to Nicole, and she can answer any technical questions on the items.
With the box culvert, I'm just gonna explain, I've given you pictures. Actually, Kevin took some really great pictures of the actual collapse. Anytime that floods, it floods our whole area back where the shed is. So that means all the equipment that you see outside, and I put that in there, there's about 100, and we've estimated about $104,000, 105, out there that's just sitting out in the elements. But when that culvert floods, everything goes underwater. And that's even, it comes up to our vehicles as well. And there's a couple of pictures on page 9 and 10 that is showing you, like, for examples, what the flooding, and this picture on page 9 at the bottom left, that is all the way on the other side by our trash can. So that is over by the woods. That's how far the flooding actually goes. And we were pulling off sticks, twigs, everything from our equipment because of all the branches that, came down from the pond all the way to the lake.
There's actually more pictures on 11 too, where you can see what it does to that gravel road right before you get to the culvert, and then what it looks like from the other side of the culvert. And you can see even that picture in the bottom right-hand corner on page 11 that it almost made it to our building.
It came up to the building, but it did not go inside.
If you remember, this culvert, obviously is an aftermath of the serious flooding we had many years ago. We thought we had it fixed in-house, and in past budgets, it just did not get approved to use money or to get funded. But with that, we also looked for grants. There were a time that we thought we had one, then we didn't. So again, we do have the most updated quote from Cochrane for the best fix. So a few of you were here in the past for those conversations.
Is this gonna give us any problem in the wetland area we've got down the park that we can't do anything with? Is there an area down the park that we're not supposed to disturb, we can't do
There's
anything?
several.
Yeah.
Well, but basically from behind the shop to the lakefront is that dedicated wetland that is supposed to be protected.
But this won't affect any of that? Okay.
Any other questions?
On capital?
Yeah.
Okay. Three things. One, Gene, I know we talked about this a couple of times, so I apologize if you told me you're visiting, but there was once a conversation with Matt about a furnace being needed in the shed. Is that needed or not?
Oh,
needed?
yeah, that's definitely needed.
Is there a reason it didn't make the list?
That's more of me not being there, not knowing, but just this last week, I just brought this conversation to him. We have some money left over in our current budget that we could get a pellet stove, so wouldn't need it, but I don't know what's capital concern, you know what I mean? I am still learning capital and everything like that. So right now, I do have money in my current budget that could pay for the pellet stove to heat that
Can we
area.
get it purchased?
Let me clarify, this is something that,
I was gonna say, it didn't make it to my desk.
No, I just sent it in this
I don't want to be
We're not
disrespectful,
doing it.
because this is something that Nicole and I had a conversation about, and I hadn't even made it to Gina with this yet. There's some money that it looks like we're not gonna need in one of our O&M accounts.
Okay.
And so she was asking me whether or not we could use it, and of course I was like,
no, that's a capital purchase, I don't think we can use it, but I had told her, I said, let's go ahead and get the quote, and if it's reasonable, I'll be happy to bring it to Gina, but I wanted to just step in because Gina, we
Yeah, sorry.
that didn't make it to your desk yet, and I apologize.
Yeah, it just happened this morning because the guys called me asking about it. So, well, they didn't really call me asking about it. They grabbed all of our propane tanks for our barbecue grill to help heat themselves down there with the little propane heaters that they brought in from home. So, and that will be costly in the long run of refilling those propane tanks, so.
From a background standpoint, it came up in a conversation I had with Matt. He's like, Richard, we don't have heat in January. And I'm like, a parks department should have heat in January because that's when you work on your equipment.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was really surprised. And so, however you guys are going to take care of it, it's going to get taken care of without us talking about capital here. That's fine. So, if you want to have a further discussion around that now, fine. This pickup truck is the 1-ton pickup, right?
We're actually wanting to replace the dump truck, because our pickup truck is still great. The dump truck, I just took it, last week, and the service gentleman was afraid to touch most of it because of the rust that is inside of it. He kind of prepared me that there might be more cost once he was, fixing the, power steering. Our, oil or, dipstick and all that area is completely rusted. The hours and the power that's gonna take, I don't even think he wants to touch it, because once he starts pulling that out, I think the whole engine is gonna have to come out, from what he was discussing. So it's really the dump truck that we were wanting to replace with the pickup.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, the dump truck, currently has 73,743 miles on it. And since 2017, we have spent $8,773 on it. But I should point out that it is an 08 dump truck that was handed down to us from Public Works. So when it was given to the department, it was already full of rust. So for what it's worth.
Fair enough. I'll tell you that the worst equipment in our city fleet is at the parks. It's obvious. Everything that I've seen, it's a night and day difference.
And
I was just curious what we were replacing.
And I believe that it's going to be replaced with F-150.
So it's a dump truck being replaced with a pickup?
Yeah, double cab pickup, so that we can use it for transporting our seasonals as well.
So I'm confused. We're not going to have a dump truck when we get done?
We could borrow from Public Works if we need it. We don't use that on a regular basis. The truck is used, and we use the Explorer more to transport and move things around, but we could use another truck, to be honest with you.
The plan for both the parks and the airport is to get away from having dump trucks on hand. They're a specialized vehicle, they're more expensive to maintain, and we don't need them. We have a fleet of dump trucks at our disposal. If she needs a dump truck, all she's gotta do is call Rob and say, hey, on Thursday, can I borrow a dump truck? And we've got a dump truck. We can plow with the other truck that we have. We have an F-250 there. We can plow with that truck. So we've got all that covered. And essentially what we're trying to do is be a little bit more efficient with the use of our vehicles. You know, if we've got, I can't remember exactly how many it is, I guess I can count them, but I know we've got 10 to 12 dump trucks over at Public Works. And yes, they get heavy use, but they're almost never all used at once. And so there's no reason why, if Nicole or Ty need a dump truck, they can't just make a phone call to Stevie and say, hey, I need a dump truck on Thursday. Stevie can make a note and say, we'll have it ready for you, and we're good to go. It's a teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Well, the time that they need all the dump trucks, the time you're not gonna be using it. That's when they're plowing snow and ice and spreading salt and all that, and you're not gonna be,
No.
you're not gonna be,
Yeah.
you're gonna be inside your cold shed.
Yeah.
Working on your wood.
Maybe, or they'll just
It
be
is
at home
not gonna
staying
be
warm.
cold anymore.
Okay. So by the way, is this irrigation pump, which, is that a hard number? Is that, we have an estimate?
Yeah, that was.
That's a hard number. That's a
Yeah,
hell
that's
of
a
a
hard
pump.
number. Yeah, it's about 15 years old. It shuts down all the time. We have to manually turn it on, so I don't.
That's fine. So from an overall standpoint, My concerns with the parks, let me start at the beginning. I think we have our biggest opportunity to increase revenue and also make folks happy based on the Citizens Advisory Committee if we invest in our parks, okay? The concern that I have, and the box culvert I'm just waffled on, because at the end of the day, I know we need it, but the last thing I want to do is have a consultant come in here and say, well, you put it in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Okay? So I'm struggling with that one, okay? Anything else in here that is a replacement, I support. I'm not sure if fencing is, I don't really want to get into all the line item details, but I would support anything that is a replacement on this list.
The fencing, let me just explain that real quick. Our fields are 300 feet. Softball, youth softball is about 200 feet. So to bring more softball into the park, we need to put up portable fencing, and that's all that is. It would come out of the ground, and we would remove it. We can store it. It's not a stationary.
Right. Well, that wouldn't
so.
necessarily affect the long-term strategy around our parks.
No.
What about the baseball pitching mound? Is that a replacement?
Yes.
That's a replacement.
Yeah.
Okay. So
And we would keep the old ones for Phoenix so that they, regulars, everyday people can use. I mean, they use our new ones, use our new ones as well, but we don't really have little bitty ones over there for the stride of baseball. If you've ever played, they step right off, and that could cause injury. It's not like something, it's the end of the world type thing, but we can use our old ones over there. So we can still kind of get some use out of our old ones, but they do have holes, and with the elements and everything, the turf is totally, they slide on it a lot with their tennis shoes because they're not allowed to wear metal cleats.
If it's a replacement, it's a replacement. It needs to be replaced. But the other, I don't have anything against pickleball. I'm not certain that we may need extra parking as we expand or optimize our park. I just don't know that we should do any of that right now. Okay, the park gate entrance is a nice thing, but at the same time, it's not a replacement. And I just think I'm very cautious around whether or not we should do anything until we have a master plan that identifies or follows our objectives and what it tells us. Okay, because we do have a lot of money that is out here in 2027. Right now, it's at $10 million that could go a long way along the way towards doing some significant things at this park and or at Phoenix or whatever, so that, for lack of a better term, we can get deeper into the leisure sports business. Maybe that's the right thing to say. These teams that come into town, you guys have done a great job of what you have, but it just continues to tell us that if we had more, we could do a lot more. Okay, and so with that, I think that putting in a pickleball court, the master plan may show, but if we put it in the wrong place, we may put it where we wanted a soccer field. Okay, yeah. We may want a pickleball court eventually. It may need to be over Phoenix or something. And I'm just talking here, but that's why I don't support anything that's additional. The culvert, oh my God, I think it's probably a good idea, but maybe if Cochran could walk down there and say, hey, I can't imagine us putting it anywhere else, then let's go forward with the culvert. It needs to be done. Okay.
That's where the creek runs off from.
I'm very aware of it.
Dave will be here tomorrow night.
Okay. And the only other thing I would say, and I apologize for reverting back to O&M, but I believe that master plan approach that we keep talking, we'll call it a master plan at this point, it may really be something else, but should go out to RFQ. Okay. I don't think we should just assume that Cochran's the right person. Okay. Now, we can take that off the line if you don't want, because it's not capital, but it sounds like we've already went down a path. We're just going to have Cochran do it because they say they've done it before and so forth. I'm not convinced that they're the right people to do it. And this is a big enough deal in my mind. It should go out to the RFQ process before we decide.
Well, the placemaker can stay the same.
Sure. And it might have to change with the.
You're right, doesn't matter. It's still professional services, whether it's
right, okay.
A, B, C, or D. But the reason I'm sure that they asked them is they've done other planning for us. But you're right, that's an easy.
It's unique
fix.
enough in my mind. I think it's an RFQ process is appropriate.
Easy process.
No problem.
Anything else, Richard? Kevin?
One is, we have in the budget here to get that plan, and do, whether we automatically go to Cochran or whether we put a request out for bids, so we have that. I would support go ahead and putting these things in the budget and putting out that RFQ to get this plan back and see why they couldn't bring that plan back to us in early spring to where we would have time to do some of these things in 2022 budget? Is that an unreasonable time for them to respond back with a?
Personally, I think it might be an unreasonable time to expect a finished document. Now, let's just say, most tightest schedule ever, we go out, do an RFQ, that doesn't tie to anything whether the budget's been approved or not. And we can get quotes and everything by the end of the year, by the time you get out, you advertise so often, you're reviewing them in December, making a decision. It's most likely they're gonna want more than 90 days if they would get started by the first of the year, say they get started by January. I think that kind of plan's probably gonna, my guess is need more than 90 days. But you still might have some idea, say summer, and then you amend the budget, change the budget, add things to the budget. I think by spring is probably tight.
Well, it sounds like the only thing that may not be able to be done would be the pickle court. Yeah, because this culvert pipe's got, it sounds like to me it's gotta get done no matter how we.
The road definitely, we need a safe, secure road to go over that creek. The other issue, again, I've only of my knowledge of the park, you've got floodplain and you've got protected wetlands that are very close to that. Unless there's a master plan to take out a big hillside, yeah, it probably could move up some, but you don't have a lot of options from that culvert to the lakefront because there's a huge area that's a wetland plus it's floodplain. So could there be another part of the road that goes over? Possibly the hillside's moved. I don't know what kind of master plan, I'm not gonna speculate where that come from, but the road's only gonna have so many options going back to the lakeside, so.
But you also have an issue of where city park ends and state park begins. There's not a whole lot of extra room back through there, to locate that in any other location. So, yeah.
So you could keep it in there, wait till you hear from summer, and then decide, okay, well, the culvert's gonna stay in there, but if we're building it, probably would be fall, winter, the end of that, later in the net year, and that might give you a time.
For what it's worth, 20 to 30 foot up the hill behind the culvert are the state park signs. It says this is our property line.
And the other side of the culvert's your wetland, your protected creek, and your floodplain.
Yeah.
So, my very uneducated guess is there's not gonna be many options where that culvert needs to go. But you can still keep a placeholder, knowing that project's gonna be a third or fourth quarter anyway. By then, you'd see what happened with your master planning. Same thing with the park.
A few comments. We touched on the projects regarding expansion of parking. I think the expansion of parking basically is us being reactive because I think we've already definitively shown a need for more parking this past year. That is not going to improve this year as we expand our services and the use of the parks. Part of what confuses me though is I believe that pickleball was tied into one of the estimates.
Yeah, the reason I put pickleball in there, probably 3 to 4 days of the week, I get calls for that. That is a growing sport, and I know that sounds kind of crazy, but we rent out the pickleball, and a lot of times we might lose a piece due to them bringing it back or whatever. But I'm just talking about if we have that, I think that's going to bring in a huge revenue. And the lights are already there. It's nothing that we have to really add besides the actual courts itself.
So do we have a bid for the parking lot without the pickleball?
Now that is separate out
It
there.
is separate.
Those are two separate lines. That
Two separate
part
lines,
I pulled
okay.
out to the parking lot is
Okay.
just the
Okay.
parking.
Because the parking lot to me
Seven needs
is
the pickleball.
an immediate need, especially if you've been there at any of the weekends this past summer, especially in
Yeah.
softball seasons when literally people are parking anywhere they can find parking spot.
Well, and we
Which in
put
turn-
those pictures in there, so you
Yeah,
can
which
see
in turn
those
basically
pictures.
tears up terrain, it creates
Yeah.
more problems, so I think that is an immediate need. Here's where I'm gonna put the kibosh on the pickleball.
Yeah.
There are 2 other entities at the lake put in pickleball in 2022.
Mhm.
I sit on the board of one of them, Tri-County YMCA.
Mhm.
So it is one of the fastest growing sports in the United States, but we are going to basically have 2 other establishments that are putting in pickleball this year as well.
Okay,
So that's really gonna diminish our production revenue from the pickleball court.
I got you.
Not to show my hand for the YMCA, but once
Yeah,
again, I sit on the board,
I mean,
that's on
that's
our
where-
agenda for 2022 is pickleball,
Bob, is the YMCA putting them in indoors or outdoors?
outdoors.
Yeah, because I know that inside was jam-packed with pickleball, and then I know Lake of the Ozark is also doing that in several areas as well. So,
So-
I mean, I was just thinking of revenue and
Yes.
the demand that
It
is.
is fast growing, but
Yeah.
because of that, other entities have picked up on it, and they've already got it approved or on their budget, or it's in the process of getting approved for 2022.
Well, I know even our churches, there's,
So-
in large areas.
It's
Building
great.
we just put new flooring in, and it's being,
Mm-hmm.
laid out for pickleball.
Yeah, it's great in theory, but everybody jumped on it, so I don't think that the revenue is gonna pay off for us in that aspect. But once again, back to the parking lot, I think that is an immediate need that we're
Priority.
behind the curve on, because once again, if you see where people were parking this past summer, and it's only going to get worse, that has created more issues, not just from a safety concern for the police force, but for grounds, maintenance, et cetera, the ruts, the terrain, it looks ugly there after a weekend.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment, please? So, one of the things I wanted to make a comment on the parking lot, and it really kind of connects to both parking lots, is if you remember when we had our summer strategic planning meeting, our city planner had brought up that in many cases throughout both of our parks, we're not following our own ordinances. This is also something that Kevin brought up a little earlier about either following our ordinances or changing them. As it stands right now, the building department is monitoring 5 different other entities that don't have paid parking that we are enforcing or in the process of enforcing or in the process of investigating them to move to paid parking. And here we are, and we're not even enforcing it ourselves. So that's something I want to make sure that the board understands. The other thing that I think is important to remember is what Gina has mentioned about about how ADA is going to be changing over the next few years. As it stands right now.
Not gonna be changing, and it's already changed.
Sorry, thank you. As it stands right now, in the soccer field area that we have 3 soccer fields there. This parking lot would essentially go where soccer field 1 is right now. That's what we would be doing. We would be turning soccer field number 1 into a parking lot.
That's the soccer field next to the playground.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just so everybody knows.
There is no ADA parking in the back of our park at all currently. So this would also help us from that standpoint as well. As far as Phoenix is concerned, the parking lot we are proposing will go on the site where the old basketball court is. We already have people parking there, but we can get a lot more spaces in there if we do it the right way, instead of just hodgepodging it and letting people park on the basketball court. So there's certainly room for parking expansion in both parks through this. And I totally understand, and I know Nicole does too, that we do have a master plan on the way, assuming that the board goes through with that. So it's really the board's pleasure, but I wanted to make sure that you were informed with exactly kind of some of the details there. And Nicole's got some great pictures in there. And those aren't all from our events. Those are spread out throughout the year. Some of them are from Fall Fest. Some of them are from
Tournaments. I mean, it just varies. And I have a ton more. I didn't feel like you needed to see a bunch of cars on grass hill or that, but sometimes it blocks our work vehicles in. It also causes congestion right there at the, little hump, I don't remember what to say.
right behind Field 3.
Technical term.
Hump dealing.
Yeah, the hump feeling thing, but it does cause congestion. We do have to ask people do want to argue with us, but, that's just part of it out there. But to keep our grounds and everything looking nice, we really do need to think about that for the future or make a decision on that.
In addition, when you have these tournaments that overflow over the Pinion, we've also run into issues with people trying to park on the side of Highway 42, and that's a real safety hazard. So, yes.
The pickleball courts, is that the same kind of court that's at Phoenix?
No, Phoenix is more, I think, just a laid out basketball from what I really know. I don't know.
It is basketball, but it's lined for pickleball.
Yeah.
Is that
interior.
mat, so to speak,
Oh, I don't
laid
know.
on top of cement pad.
I don't know what the engineer, so I
I'm
apologize.
certainly not a professional pickleball player, but I've played my share of it. And that pickleball court, in my opinion, is worthless.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna do something like that, I wouldn't.
The idea of the basketball court, it was really for the basketball court, but how do we get other uses? And I think that's where the early pickleball come in. It was really built for basketball, but we knew we wanted to get, let's get a different kind of use in, and so that was how I don't know, pickleball.
Have you tried it, Todd?
Yes.
Is it the surface material? It doesn't bounce off the surface material, or?
So it's usually tennis mat is laid on top of a cement slab. And if there's a dip in that slab, if the ball lands on the mat that's above that dip,
It's dip.
I mean, the ball doesn't even bounce.
So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just, I'd like to expand a little bit on the parking facilities at the park. And those of you who have been around a while know that this is something that I have, that has been near and dear to my heart from the beginning. And it goes back to the need for the city to be the rule and not the exception to. Parking out of the park, I was here when they did the original master plan, and it has become quite a bit more than what it was initially supposed to. If you remember, the original plan had an amphitheater up pond and some different things, and when you go down there now and you see the amount of vehicles that are in it at not just an event here or there, but almost every weekend. It brings into the situation of what our requirements are. Okay, and I understand talking about tearing up the yard and doing these things. We don't want to do that either. But our design guidelines and our code require that all public or commercial property parking lots are to be paved and striped. Okay, and while our code has a minimum requirement for everything, what you're required to have is what you need. Okay, that's no different for us than it is for a business. If you're a business, if my minimum requirement for off-street parking requires that you have 100 parking spaces, but you clearly need 200, you're required to have 200 paved and striped parking spaces. That's what your requirement is. And in this particular situation, I had to do a little toddler, hold my breath and stomp to get the original ones paved the first year that we wanted to do it. And this is certainly a situation to where Ron and the compliance officers are trying to catch up on, some gravel parking facilities that went in for specific businesses within town. They didn't know that they couldn't do it, and within COVID and not having compliance officers and that kind of thing, some things happen, okay? And some parking lots went up, but it makes it difficult to, go out and enforce those requirements when we've got a situation that's very similar to it ourselves. And it's certainly a situation where when we start talking about the proposed location of this being located right next to the playground in closest proximity to the softball fields, leaving a little more than, I think it's about 2 acres left of park of field, soccer field, that you could see something go there, but this would place a parking lot in between the two facilities, whatever that may be in accordance to the new plan that they come out with. But bottom line, for what we need and what we would require of anyone else, we need to come up with, more parking that is hard surface out there.
For what it's worth, that the 270,000 that we would spend on that parking lot to turn soccer field number 1 into a parking lot would get us 100 spaces. And if we don't do the pickleball court, then we would just turn the remainder of the soccer field into green space. So did we determine that 100 makes us compliant then? Is that what we determined?
No.
How do we know what compliance is on a park? I mean, I know we use seats, we use square footage, we use active use and so forth. Have we determined how many spaces we're short?
The master plan can help us determine that.
Okay, and I'm okay with that, but what I think I'm hearing people promote, for lack of a better term, I mean, if we suggest is we should go ahead with the parking lot without a master plan. That's what I
Well,
thought.
I think, I thought what I was hearing is that they were going to see the master plan come in, leave these items in the budget, and once the master plan identified, how this should be defined,
There's gonna be
then it's there and we can move forward with the project. That's what I thought I understood, I could be wrong.
I'd make the same recommendation as I did the culvert. It is a capital investment, infrastructure. If you know we're gonna get a park master plan, those same things, we know we wanna do it in some form or fashion. It's there, and it's placemaker is there in the budget for, once the master plan comes in.
Does that approach that we just discussed, because I have no trouble with, does that cause Ron to carry problems with compliance at this point?
Yes.
We're not in compliance now.
We're not in compliance.
It ain't nothing new, right?
You start
months.
talking situations like a park, there are going to be things that they have out there, events. We may never have enough parking if like the Easter egg hunt. We're never going to have 4,000 parking spaces over there, but if we have 2,000 kids again, and we have people parked up at the mall and Walmart and all those things, those are kind of the events that you just can't study for. What our best ability to do would be to, 100 spaces would give us a lot of spaces towards getting those cars that are parked backing in towards the creek, off of that area and onto our parking spaces. It's certainly a situation where Mike can tell you, I believe we need more than 100. But 100 gets us a lot closer to compliance than none.
And quite frankly, if we don't use the other portion of the soccer field for pickleball, you've got additional parking space there.
We also have dealt with this compliance thing. Like I said, I've dealt with a couple of situations. And the bottom line is, as Ron can attest to, is he wants a plan. That's what he asked for, because that's what I've taken back to the people. Look, you're not in compliance, you don't have to do it today, but you need to work with the staff and give them a plan.
Well, for what it's worth.
So that's what we have here. We've got a plan to get it done, so that would be the approach that we would want to make to them too, is that we have a plan and we have the money, and as soon as we get the master plan, we plan on doing it in third or fourth quarter. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's not like we're not going to do it.
For what it's worth, I was quoted $350,000 for 150 spaces, and that was the entire soccer field. So basically, what
Well, you
they,
can take the money that you have in here for pickleball and shift it over to that.
I guess you could, depending upon what we find out through the master plan.
Right.
I'm good with the capital. If you want to leave it in there, that's fine. I mean, I'm sure that time will allow us to get to it even if the master plan comes through. But as long as we're not going to execute until we have a master plan that we're comfortable with, then I have no problem.
All right, any further discussion? All right, what I'd like to do then is just to, so that I understand what the board wants to move forward with on capital. We have basically what is identified under parks with the inclusion of the 2 parking lots. So, Richard, you had talked about things that you don't want to see there. And I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I'd like to have a motion which would look at these individual items. And if in your motion you want to say, I want everything but this, this, and this, and then if we could, vote on that, then that's fine. But we can certainly have discussion and move forward there. Is there any further discussion on that approach before, we get a motion on the floor? Do I have a motion from anyone?
I'll take a shot.
All right.
This one's going to be complicated.
Well, just go down the list and say what you.
Softball fencing, you want to go down the list? Softball fencing's in, mounds are in, mowers in. Are these replacement shed additions?
No, if you go back to that, photo there, this is, to protect our equipment that's sitting out. It is just straight out, so we're gonna put a lean-to shed on the back side of our shed.
Okay, sheds are in, pickup trucks in, irrigation pumps in, entrance gates out. Pickleball courts is out. Culverts in, And I guess parking lots
How
are.
about landscaping?
Oh, landscape,
It's only
I never think
$1,000.
landscaping is capital, so I
Yeah.
apologize. Yeah, land.
You're right. Okay, and then, the two, parking lots,
Put them in.
okay? All right, so, we have a motion on the floor, and let's see if I can clarify. We have a motion on the floor for all items, in the original proposal, excluding the park entrance gate and the pickleball court. Is that correct? Including those items that were left out of general fund, which, were the parking lots, in both Penny Park and at, our main park.
Yes, I'll
Do I have a motion? Second, we have a second? Bob is the second, all right? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, before we move on, away from parks, we have the, personnel. We did not get a motion on that. The
Less
changes,
part-time, added full-time.
right,
Move as budgeted. I move
okay,
personnel parks as budgeted.
okay. We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have Bob, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Let's move on.
All right, so the next department that has capital is the police department. And they do not have any added personnel. There was a couple notes on my O&M sheet. The one increase in maintenance services is tied to new equipment, which is the body cams. So unless there's other questions on police, other than that, we'll just jump to capital and he can explain the capital or answer questions.
Do we get any, cost share on our SOR officer?
Yes, we have a billing contract
I
with
couldn't see what was
Osage.
that in revenue, I didn't.
Yes, it's in,
No, it's there, that's all.
oh, okay, yes, we do have we're still under contract with Osage, School of Osage.
Okay, that's all.
Any other questions before we move on to capital?
One quick one.
Yes, go ahead.
Chief, do you see a day next year? I've had more than one conversation with a couple of business owners where, I'm sorry, I'm the chief as usually. Apologize. Where we would be able to actually offer security services, for our folks. Because I don't think that historically that we've really been staffed for that. Is that a fair statement?
This
And the
year,
mechanism contractually, it's
Right.
staffing.
yeah, the
Right.
mechanisms there, the staffing wasn't there this year.
Right.
Right now, we're 3 down. So we anticipate being full soon, I hope.
Well, do we, at one point, as of December, if nothing changed, and something could have changed, we were gonna be fully staffed in December.
No, we were
Is that still the
gonna
case?
we were still gonna be 2 short. Well, would have been 1 short. The gentleman from Washington State, he turned us down and went to Camden County because the pay rates before I even started here. So that puts us back down to 2. And then detective horizontally, take the public administrator position in Camden County, puts us 3 down.
Well, I hope we find a way to get fully staffed in a place that we can actually offer that service, because that gives our officers an opportunity to, and I know at one point you were gonna check, and we haven't followed up with you, it's whether you said years ago we weren't competitive in price of security firms, but you felt like now we might be. Did you ever check on that?
We were always a little higher. Now Camden County's actually getting ready to raise theirs again, so they'll be exactly what we're paying, $40 or what we charge.
In my conversations that I don't know if it's relationships or whatever, but there's no real interest at this point to use Camden County versus their security firms they're already using.
Correct.
But there's a distinct interest to use Osage Beach Police because of the relationships and the reputation you guys have, okay? So in a perfect world, and I realize we're slow progressing, we not get there, we would have officers fully staffed, maybe one over because we expected some attrition. And folks Dog Days, Mark and I and Luke have had, and I spoke to you about it, several conversations. They take us in a heartbeat, and I think it provides an opportunity for our officers. Plus, they're much more happier at a similar price for us than that. So.
When we get into the bar situations, there's some stipulations that we'd have to go by. We couldn't work on the inside of the bar. We could sit on the parking lot.
Okay. Or you could wander.
We can go inside.
Can you wander around the pool?
Thanks.
it's kind of that gray line. We'd have to discuss with the.
Okay. Well, I never assumed that that we couldn't walk around.
Yeah, it's in our policies that, you know, if the majority of their business comes from selling alcohol or anything like that, that's.
Is that state law or local?
That's our department policy and best practice.
So that's changeable.
Yeah, it's changed.
That's changeable, if that's an option. So if that's an ordinance that you see is not fit, bring it to us.
But it's not an ordinance, it's a department policy and best practices by our legal side. So it's-
Legal, insurance, then.
Insurance.
Oh, insurance.
Liability.
Right,
Okay, that might make a little more sense.
Right.
Okay, fair enough. That's all I had on that. That's all I have on
Anything on the O&M side? Under capital, we're, right page here.
Page 49.
I've got stuff tucked in.
Oh.
So, operating capital, any questions on that?
It's a LiDAR unit. I brought that up last night.
LiDAR unit is a speed measurement tool, the laser device.
Oh, okay.
Basically, the one that we're replacing is, we had to take it out of service this year with past certifications, and it's cost prohibitive to repair.
Are license plate recognition cameras a replacement or an additional capital?
They are, our current LPR license plate reader that we have is on a vehicle, and it's 10 plus years old. The manufacturer will no longer, it's no longer supported for updates or anything. So it's cost prohibitive. We have one.
Okay.
And it has 3 cameras, and it's a mobile device. It's mounted on a car, so when the car's sitting back on the parking lot, not used or anything, it's not functioning. It's only when the officer's in. These new license plate recognition cameras, they're stationary. You know, we pick out.
Stationary as in they stay in the vehicle.
No, they're pole mounted, like the proposal that we have, they did a survey to see what would be the best locations for our city. They're proposing 4 of them around the 42 junction and 2 around KK junction here on the Parkway. They'll read every car that goes by. If we have, say we're looking for a vehicle we get a partial license plate. It only has 3 digits. We can go into the system, search for those 3 digits. Any plate that has those 3 digits in that order, it'll pull up a picture of the vehicle and license plate, so we can get the rest of the full plate possibly and catch our suspects.
But does it alert us that someone came through, or do we have to sit there and go look through video all the time?
I was getting to that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry.
So if we have wanted subjects, our dispatch center, we can enter a hot list, is what they call a hot list for all the plates, stolen vehicles, vehicles associated to a subject that we're looking for that has a warrant. We can put that license plate into the system. When it goes by, it will send an alert to dispatch. You can dispatch an officer that's closest to that area, so we can clear up those warrants, catch those stolen vehicles, and so on.
So we don't use it in a proactive manner. We use it in a, for lack of a better term, a reactive manner, because somebody's already convicted or we're sure looking for them. That's how we use it.
Correct. Or you know, we're not just.
It's not a red light camera.
It's not a red light camera or
Okay,
anything like that.
okay, that's all I need.
So we can.
And then did we have an F-150 truck in our fleet before?
We did not. We had a 90,
Animal.
I believe it was a 94 Chevy Silverado that we got from compliance when the police department took animal control back. We got rid of that vehicle last year, I believe. This one will be set up for the detective bureau investigations and also supplement the animal control when we needed to go pick up a dog. Or we can put one of the portable kennels in the back of the truck, put the dog in and transport it back to the PD or wherever it needs to be.
What do we do now?
They get put in a patrol car if they have to.
Does the kennel work inside the car? Does it go inside the
No,
car?
we don't have a kennel. It's just the prisoner cage partition.
So
Oh, boy.
They're stuck in the back.
oh, so you don't have a kennel?
No, we don't have a kennel, or a vehicle that we can currently put one in now. The animal control truck had a topper on it, so we could just put the dog back in the.
So we reduced the fleet last year and now we're increasing the fleet this year is what it sounds like. Is that a fair statement?
We currently have a vehicle fleet of 17. We've got 2 administration cars, which is mine and Lieutenant Taylor's, 3 detective vehicles, and the Ford F-150 will be one of the detective vehicles.
One of the 3.
One of the 3. It's
Okay.
replacing.
It's just a
one.
different kind of vehicle.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I have.
And then 12 on fleet.
That's all I have.
Any other questions? All right, let's get a motion to approve the capital items as submitted. If there are no questions or whatever adjustments you want to make.
So moved.
Wait a minute. I didn't quite follow that one. Because you said whatever adjustments you want to make.
Well, I'm just saying, if you don't, I mean,
Oh.
if you don't want what's been listed, what's been submitted, then let's do what we did with parks. Okay, tell me what you wanna, what you wanna exclude.
Bill's made a motion.
And,
So you're including everything?
I'm including everything.
Okay, second.
All right, we have a first, we have a second. Any further question? Seeing none, is a motion approved? Excuse me, is there, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, let's move on. 911.
Yeah, 911 center didn't have any change in people count. Again, the summary would be there with O&M, kind of highlighting the major changes there. And I think there's one capital item. This is the final payment of the debt, which I know I went over debt. It's in police, 911, and ambulance. This is the final payment for that, the post-win system.
Todd, do you want to explain the request for the capital?
The capital, it's our recorder that records all the radio traffic, telephone calls in the dispatch center. We just need to upgrade this. It's with the new P25. Basically, it's new guidelines through for the radio world. It's just an upgraded piece of equipment.
Any questions? A motion to approve the capital items submitted for the 911 center.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
First and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Move on.
So IT is the next department. It was engineering, but we took out or decided to keep in a placeholder for the engineering equipment. So unless there's really questions on the engineering side, we can move to IT for the next big capital. With you guys. IT did not have any people change request. O&M, again, there was a couple different explanations on their O&M and capital items. Again, you can look at those on the capital investment draft I handed out or on page 57.
Any questions on the information capital items?
Pretty cheap, we got to keep it up and running.
Huh?
So they look pretty cheap to keep things up and running.
Correct. Well, we've come a long way. We've come a long
We're
way.
spending a lot more than that on a yearly basis.
Yeah, we are coming a long way.
So some of that has been moved to O&M over time because of our outsourcing. But so some of these things are listed as replacements. Some of them look like they might be replacements. Or is there anything that isn't a quote replacement?
In the capital list?
Yes, for IT.
Well, unless I mistakenly messed their notes up, the ones that were discussed were replacements. If not, then they would be additions. But I guess Michael will look at the list to make sure I got them labeled correctly from your paperwork.
Or upgrades that are required. I mean, like content manager software for Encode, we use Encode, so I assume that's some type of software.
This is what I was discussing that Mike can explain that portals of software that we can add to Tyler that will, content, manage our content, and then some permitting for building in the other departments.
So first of all, everything here is replacement.
That's all I need to know.
As far as the Tyler Content Manager and how that correlates with electronic storage of documents. So one of the things that we're looking at doing in 2022 is adding what's called Tyler Content Manager. And what this does is it allows us to keep invoices in our financial software system instead of a file cabinet behind Abby's desk, okay? We can immediately start using it moving forward and then start going back and putting old records in so that we can eventually, we like to keep, I can't remember how far back, Carrie Bell. About 5 years. So, go back, get what we've had over the last few years in there. That's certainly capable. It does come with a scanner, I believe, that's included in that, and it also is compatible with the existing scanners that we have. So it gives us the capability to have more. I mean, there's a lot of backlog there. It gives us the capability to have more than one person kind of doing it at the same time. And so essentially, once we buy this module, it means that invoices no longer need to be kept in paper form. Great. As far as the licensing and permitting software upgrades, those upgrades kind of take licensing and permitting kind of into the cloud-based environment. More customer interfacing. It comes with an employee portal, which we can look at. It's part of that. It also comes with the ability for us to allow our customers to do more contactless stuff online, whether it's applying for permits, applying for licenses. This is something we have struggled with the software that we have, is getting everything online. This takes all of that and it gives us the state-of-the-art current technology that Encode is using, and puts it in the hands of Ron and Tara, includes all the training.
So with that software, I'm Mr. Businessman here in Osage Beach and I want to renew my permit, okay? Do I have to fill out a piece of paperwork on the city hall?
No.
Okay, but without that software, I have to do at least one of those, if not both.
Or it has to be manipulated through other systems.
Yeah.
But the idea is to get it a one-stop shop.
Right, but we're not gonna, this gives us the ability to have it go to our website, click on a button, fill out the form or whatever, send it off, and I can do it from my home. Is that right?
Some form or fashion, yes.
And
okay, because you did say more capability, so I wasn't sure if it gave us that capability.
you can even do it with this, you can do it from your phone.
Okay, good. That's all I need. That's good. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, is a motion to approve the information technology capital items as submitted? Bob, Tyler, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Move on.
So the last department, was skip to economic development, because emergency management, we had a decrease in siren maintenance and no employees, so that one's easy. Economic development is the last official department in, we skipped right now. Page 59. So a couple things happened with O&M, if you noticed, and economic development. It had a major decrease because we paid off the TIF. This is the department that the expense flow at one time flowed from the general fund sales tax. This is our expense line that moved into the TIF fund. So you have that decrease, and permanently that decrease in the TIF. This was also And it is now potentially, if approved, a manned department. So it was requested the strategic plan that we try to pull the trigger on an economic developer. So when Cindy and I were researching the pay plan, we had this particular job benchmarked. How we knew what job to benchmark is we did lots of research from different cities, economic development organizations, because there are certified economic developers out there. I found a job description that I thought best suited our needs of the city, or at least, again, I didn't recreate the wheel. Economic developers this is an economic development specialist. The main points of the job is basically engaging to create business environment for growth and expansion within the city, outreach visits, maintain relationship with area businesses, facilitate and initiate programs and relationships and studies, strategic planning for development, expansion, and retention for current business and new business. Any initiatives, activities that facilitate those. They basically perform economic development duties that support work to broaden the city's retail, commercial, industrial base, as well as current business retention. Liaison to citizen committees, nonprofit organizations, special interest group, neighborhood groups concerning economic development problems, staff, economic development. They plan and staff economic development events and programs, influences and builds relationships with prospects, consultants, company decision, media, for growth, expansion, and retention. So it's a 2-page job description, but that was pretty much the job that I had asked the consultant to benchmark for that. It does require a degree or 5 to 8 years of experience. Plus, like I said, whether or not, if this is why we would move forward, whether or not we would require the certified economic developer, that'd be something that we would try to facilitate and get them to that point, depending on what stage of the career they're at. They did benchmark this at level 9, so I suspect that based on a decent amount of experience with the job description, you may bring someone in around the $50,000 mark. When Cindy estimated the salary for 2022, we did a partial year, just thinking, if we go forward, we're not gonna have anybody in January 1. So that's why you're not necessarily maybe seeing the full salary in 2022, because by the time we get somebody in here, it could be a few months in. So this was upon your request. This was kind of this is the job description that we created and benchmarked. So therefore you have that, and you have a little bit, several $1,000 increase for training. Training means training and travel, whether it's training or whether it's travel into shows or programs. That would include that. As you move through to future years, that could potentially go up. But for the first year, it was my best estimate there. A little bit addition in, also a little bit addition in memberships. Because of that, there's still memberships that I personally would keep up as well, but they would mirror that. So anyway, that's really the new addition. I'll be happy to answer questions in deciding that's where that would move forward with.
Questions on personnel? Yes, Bob.
On the job qualifications, you said must have a degree. A degree in what?
Requires a bachelor degree and 5 to 8 years of experience. Business or it's like a, hold on, I don't get that. Give it a second. I did the quick, it explains here because it has to have, okay, bachelor's degree from accredited college or university in business administration, economic development, marketing, urban planning, and or related fields. At least 3 years of aggressively responsible experience in economic development, marketing, business attraction, community development, planning, or related field, and equivalent,
All right, just want to make sure we had a broad spectrum of bachelor's.
I went over the first part.
No one had communications to that.
Huh?
Communications?
Communications? Yep. Do that.
For communications degrees or.
Yeah, communications degree.
Any additional questions or comments?
Is this presently set up for a half year,
No,
3/4 year?
9 months.
Probably closer to
So I
80%.
budgeted 50,000, but I didn't budget, I only budgeted for 46 weeks, that's why it's at 44,000 something. Because I figured it'd take us 6 weeks to get the position filled.
So about 80%.
Okay.
And I also double checked this just in comparison to immediate people that I know that are in these, and again, titles. We did not label it a director because there's not people under, there's some technicalities that we're given, and it fits in line, so.
Who's this position you report to?
City administrator.
Thank you, because that's what I was gonna ask. It's
Sorry.
not in the org chart, so.
Well, it's not a management position, so it would be city administrator. It's a good point, Richard, I should add a box.
Not a problem, I mean,
No,
it's just,
you're right. As soon
that's
as
what
I-
I was gonna ask.
As soon as
Where's
I
the
was explained,
reporting
like, well, you're right, it still would have its own box, so, nope.
to? Okay. I hope you can get the right person for $50,000 a year. If you can, great, that surprised me, but if you can't, good luck to you, and if it works out well, so let's get, if you need a motion, motion is planned.
I guess one thing that does bother me a little bit when I look at conferences, you're actually adding about $6,000 a year compared to what we've looked at in years past. I'm not sure that's enough to travel, to promote, and quite frankly, right now, as far as the promotion of new business, I don't see this position quite needed at this point because we have a tremendous interest and inflow, of new business. But the other supporting functions of this job, like working with existing businesses and those types of things, that's something that we don't do now, and I think it's critical to economic development. So, while it may not be needed to attract, it certainly is needed for some of the other issues associated with it. So, yes, since this is an addition, I would like to have a motion to.
Are we talking about just the personnel section of this budget, or are we talking about the operations and maintenance of this budget?
Basically, right now, all I'm talking about, and what Richard brought up, and what we have been approving is the actual addition of that person, okay?
You went off and talked about transfer, about the travel and about the conference, so I didn't know if that was part of what we're going to be discussing.
I'm just saying that
It's responsible.
I don't think that there's enough money there. I don't know how much money we might need there, but, I just think that might be a little low, but I don't know what it would be.
I know the mayor had asked me about that too, and I said, well, honestly, the first year, you get the mayor in the first 10 months, they're not gonna be, in my opinion, they're not gonna be flying off to Vegas, they're not gonna be flying up there. Recon is happening next month. Next side is actually, going on our behalf in December, so we're gonna be meeting with them, in November pre their first, because we have a next side program. So yes, they will be traveling. Yes, there will be organizations we want to be involved in, but they're fairly close. Even when Mike and I go to our annual conference, should we get to go again, we haven't been in a couple of years, a couple $1,000 gets you, just depending on where it is. So yes, with 6,500 or 7, there's a few economic development things I'm sure the mayor and myself will continue to go to that's very, very minimal here that's included. But the bulk of that is for that person. I don't see the first year they're being prepared to fly over. A lot of this stuff is virtual now. They're, and that's why I said should in future. That may change depending on what the initiatives or what the situation is, so.
I would see it being very, next site, and making some of the trips that next site makes to promote us. So anyway,
Getting oriented.
I'm not sure what we put in there, whether we put another 5,000 in or just leave it as it is. So,
I was doing this.
we need to do it. It's kind of one of those early on situations that
And MML's here next year, so there's a little bit
Right,
of
yeah.
history standpoint.
Yeah, of course, that's different budget.
Oh, is it a different line item
No, for this person, that would be that line.
for that person?
Yes.
Oh, that's right, because that goes through mayor and board of Aldermen.
Right.
I forgot, you're right.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to accept the addition of this position. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a second with Phyllis. Any further question? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Sorry.
Aye. I'm opposed.
You're opposed?
Yes, sir. I've been opposed from this position all along.
Okay.
Changed my mind yet.
Okay, well, our district, we didn't get any other comments, so, okay. All right, let's move on. There is no capital associated with this, it was only personnel. I'm sorry, there is some capital not associated with this person, but with a couple of other, functions, so.
Yeah, so economic development is really our community, advertising program. So we do have in the budget 10 to 15 new light displays. Few of these may be replacements. I can't tell you a number. It's just been a number of years since we've expanded our light displays. I can't say might be able to, are they all replacements? No. Are some of them new to expand and kind of get some lively up on our holiday light displays? That's the 18,000 there. Banners, this is a request to replace all our banners. We'll go through the process, should we want a new theme, or, I know the mayors, we talked about what that looks like, but it is time to totally replace all the banners. We are slowly getting rid of them. If it's something you still want to continue to do, but the majority of them are not fit to go back out this spring, and so either we, in my opinion, I've not talked to Kevin about this because transportation takes care of the banners, but either we just put up a few around City Hall that are salvageable, or we make a decision to, do you want a new theme? What do you want to look like? We've got the brackets, so it's really just the banners, and this 190 gets from one end of town to the other, not every pole, but similar to the way we've been doing it. So we're finally asking for that. We are saving some because as long as we do the same size, we don't have any hardware replacement, which is a good thing. So that's the 30,000.
Mike?
John, you had asked me to bring this up, and I just wanted to add, so a couple things about the banners. First of all, one of the things I'd like to look at is diversifying a little bit. Maybe instead of getting 190 of the same type of banner, maybe we look at 2 or 3 different patterns, maybe even expanding into the park, putting some banners down in the park. The banners that we have in the City Hall parking lot are even older than the ones that we have on the parkway, so I kind of want to include that as well. And then the other thing that the mayor specifically wanted me to bring up was we have been approached by the Elks Lodge, and they have an idea to somehow incorporate veteran recognition into some of the banners. Now, we've talked a little bit about this on just kind of a high level, and I've told the Elks Lodge that nothing is really going to happen until we kind of get through the board workshops and the budget and everything, but we've got a couple of different ideas. Their idea was they wanted to put them from one end to the other on the poles that we weren't using. I don't know, I think that might be a little overkill. We also talked about the possibility of them buying some banners and us putting them up the month of November, kind of like what we do with breast cancer awareness for the hospital in the month of October. But we would take care of those banners. They would buy them, we would put them up, we would take them down. We've also talked about the idea of maybe using that to put in the park, and maybe we do it that way. So I just wanted to bring that up because there is some interest around town. As you know, we already do this in October for the hospital. If you go down Nichols Road, you see all of the nice breast cancer awareness banners that we put up, we take down. The hospital pays for those, we store them, we put them, we do all that. When something goes bad, we say, hey, hospital, you've got one broken banner, they replace it, we move on. So whether we do that type of thing with the veterans, or whether we expand that in some way, they have an interest in expressing consideration for veterans. And I just wanted to bring that up so that you guys are aware that that's kind of going on behind the scenes as well.
All right, any questions?
We have to consider that that's going to put more workload on our transportation department too. So I'm not opposed to it, I'm just making that statement. When we say we're gonna put banners up more 2 or 3 times, we're gonna have those crews out there, that's manpower.
But the nice part about this, with Veterans Day falling when it does, it's right before we put up our holiday decorations. Okay, so, you know, we don't have to go out and change back the banners and then come back later on. We can kind of transition. We haven't gone anywhere with the Elks. This was something that they had seen somewhere else. And I'll be real honest with you, there's a group that's trying to upsell them, you know, for this. And of course, they want their own banner size, they want their own hangers. We're not going there. If we get into some kind of a program with them, you know, we will work that out where everything is consistent and flows right through with the existing, sorry about that.
A grant?
Yeah, with the existing holders and whatever that we have. So anyway, I might just brought that up just as a general interest point, but you know,
Sounds
at
good
this
to me.
point, you know, we do need to replace the banners and hope there's an interest to do so. So any further questions?
One real quick.
Yes, sir.
Is there any particular reason their holiday light displays are economic development versus just in the parks budget?
Well, it started out well. I mean, I guess
Just because it's
one way or the
so
other. Holiday lights, when they were on the parkway, it was more promoting community marketing. It's kind of like yeah, I still would argue we wouldn't even put it still in the parks because community promotion events, that's where our fall festival is. Just because it's held in the park, it's just part of our economic
It's also
community events.
It's also where we, you know, the stars that we have. So that's part of our, but it's kind of all encompassing as far as our holiday lights is concerned. And we still do plan on doing the displays on the street corners like we did and had a lot of success with last year. So that's part of the plan for this year as well.
Great. Any further questions? All right, if not, do we have a motion to accept the capital items proposed for economic development? So moved. All right, Tyler, do we have a second? Phyllis.
Second.
Any further questions? Seeing that, is there a motion approved? I'm sorry.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Oh, we do have one more that we haven't done, and that's
We're so close.
city clerk, right?
Well,
right
city
over
clerk,
it.
I did scoot over city clerk. There is a scanner in the city clerk capital. It is an addition, but it's part of the record scanning, and they needed a dedicated one for their stuff. So that is, I did skip over that one from the beginning.
Okay. Is there any questions on approving that? If not, do I have a motion to approve the request for the city clerk capital items?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All right. Tyler.
Aye.
All in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. That's it for tonight?
No.
What else we have?
Right? You said one more last time.
Well, I forgot I missed.
That's right, we have.
We actually have two,
Yeah, she is.
She's like, I've been here all day night, why you gonna skip me?
Yeah.
We actually have two more items on the agenda for tonight, but I'm gonna skip down CIT. I don't have any additional comments from CIT at this point that I went over. That will come back up because that the outgoing from CIT really involves water and sewer. So I'm not even gonna touch on CIT because it'll be brought back up. Ambulance, the last one, we always do this kind of out of order, but Todd is over that department, Tommy's with us. There are no major people changes in ambulance.
What pages?
I'm sorry?
What pages?
Oh, I'm sorry.
88.
88, see, I hadn't even got there yet. O&M, I did, just like I did all funds, ambulance had an increase in some uniforms, a little bit in medical supplies. And I did tell one of you aldermen an incorrect statement, and maybe it was everybody when we talked about O&M. The increase in uniforms did have something to do with employees, but it's bulletproof vests, and it was the particular type of uniform for safety. So I want to correct my incorrect comment last time. So unless you have further questions on O&M, there's 4 capital items that Todd and Tommy are here to answer questions about.
I have a question on O&M that you just brought up to clarify. Are we putting bulletproof vests on our ambulance people? Is that what I just heard you say?
You did.
Are they happy about that?
It's,
I'm asking her.
Thankful? It's safety issue.
Are you happy about it?
No,
Do you think you need it?
absolutely.
Okay.
Day-to-day action, it's fine. Yeah, this is good.
Just to add a little bit to that, it won't be that they have to wear it 24/7 like the officers do. If they get sent to dispatch to a call mutual aid like they did with the shooting event like Ozark, they've got the equipment to protect themselves.
So they can choose when they put it on?
Yes, there'll be a policy.
That's fine.
A guideline to tell
Right,
them,
right.
certain guidelines to do it. And if they get to a situation where they feel uncomfortable, even though they don't have to wear it, they can throw it on.
Sure.
The bar fight that they're being thrown into or something like that.
And it's definitely would have made us feel a lot more comfortable in that situation.
Oh, I'm sure.
I wish they would give me the ambulance when I was on the ambulance.
I have nothing else.
Currently, the fire department's already got them. They put them into effect. They had them for the last couple of years, and then Lake Ozark fires, they're in a rush to get them right now after the event that happened on the strip.
any other O&M questions? If not, let's move to capital.
Any questions on capital? I'll just,
Elephant in the room.
I'll go with the elephant in the room, which is the ambulance.
I think we had discussed that before, hadn't we?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The one we're replacing is a 2010. It's got 57,000 miles on it, 57.5. This year, we've already put $2,500 into maintenance on it. Last year, we put a little over 4,000 on it. This year, back in August, they were responding to a call. It broke down, had to be towed back,
That's our backup one you're speaking of.
That's our backup one that we were speaking of. But it seems like every time we put this thing in service, it's having a major repair. Luckily, on that call they were going on, the gentleman was already deceased. And it no fault of us. He'd been down for a while. But that's that chance that we take every time we use it. Our initial goal, our initial plan was when we bought our new one back in 2015, was to alternate the new ambulance 1 year or 1 month, our backup ambulance a month, and alternate it. But once we put the power load in the new ambulance, to save the employees' backs and any employee injuries like that, we made that our primary truck, and we're going to use the old one, the 2010 model, when we are, ours is in the shop or it's out of service for some reason or another. They're currently in it right now because the power load system is down and we're waiting parts from the manufacturer to get it fixed. Our recommendation is to purchase a new ambulance this year. Unfortunately, it is to the tune of about $240,000. And that includes the power load in this one and the power cot. So we would be buying it extra.
How many ambulances do we have?
2.
Just 2.
Just 2.
What was that question? I'm sorry.
How
How
many
many we had?
One main one and one reserve.
So will this one become the primary then?
This one will be the primary. In theory, with both of them having the power cots, we would go back to alternating monthly use. Our new ambulance now has 56,000 miles on it. So just about 1,000 less than what our backup does.
And what's the year of that one?
2015.
That's a new one. The new one's
Gotcha.
250.
That's basically a F-350 with a box on it, right?
F-350 or an E-350, whichever.
Whatever, right,
whichever
or
chassis
van, right.
we decide to go with.
And those things should run 300,000 miles, so it should be in great shape.
We're currently looking for an F-350 with the truck, F-450 with a truck type chassis, so we can get the 4-wheel drive version versus.
That's what's in this budget.
That's what's in this budget, yes.
Chief, did you give them the maintenance on this?
I touched on the last 2 years. In 2019, we actually were fortunate, we had no repairs on it. In 2018, 270, 297, and 2017, 195. So the last 2 years have been pretty rough ones. It had some substantial oil leaks. That's what the repairs were last year. And every time they fixed one repair, it was like sticking your finger in the dike, another oil leak started up somewhere else.
This particular ambulance has been kind of you guys have struggled to use because you don't trust the damn thing, because you have so many problems with it. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. This one was also, when we bought it, it was a remount. So it was a new chassis, but the old box. We had some issues with it initially, back when we first got it. The air conditioner didn't work properly. They had all kinds of issues with that, and some wiring issues. Those, so far, have been.
So what are your guidelines, Mike? When would this new one be, or the one that we have be replaced? At 10 years?
Specialized, 15, it could be a specialized.
I have, it's considered specialized, so I have
It'd
it,
be 6 and
I have it in
6
30.
years.
Okay, I'm sorry. What did you say, Mike?
The new one,
Uh-huh.
I have it in 2030 is being replaced.
So.
The new one, you've got the budget.
The currently new one, the current one we call.
We have a 2010, which we're asking to sell this year.
Right.
Or next year, and we have a 2015. I thought you asked about.
Oh, the 15 is the one that's gonna be done in 30.
I thought you asked
Okay.
about the new one.
15
I
years.
apologize if I
Okay,
misunderstood.
no, I understand. That's fine. That's fine.
So
This one, that one, the new one, the old one, whatever is hard. Okay, so it's a 15-year schedule.
And for what it's worth, when I went back 5 years on the maintenance on the E450, I came up with over 11,000 just in the last 5 years. So they may have skipped a year, but I think before that, there was also some other issues we dealt with.
There may have been some coding differences too.
Yeah. So this one officially 2025, but because of the issues we're having on it, it's being brought now, correct?
Yes, that was.
So you've got the ambulances listed as 15-year replacement?
Yeah, specialized vehicles, I sure do.
Yeah, but it's an emergency vehicle. You've got your police cars replacing them in 6 years, and you got an ambulance you're replacing in 15 years? I don't buy that. That ambulance needs to be more
Doesn't
than
take a rocket
15
scientist.
years.
But police cars are daily usage all day. Ambulances aren't 10-hour drive time.
They're not F-450s either that are built for 300,000 or 400,000 miles.
I see what you're saying, 15 years seems long to me, but then again.
It's also not saving lives like the ambulances are.
Here we go.
Kevin, guidelines.
I know, but that guideline to me is just too far.
Well, we can move them.
Are there any questions as far as replacing the ambulance, because that seems to be the big dollar sign in the ambulance capital request, discussion on it?
I'll just say this, I don't truly support it, I'm gonna vote for it.
Okay.
But the only reason I am is because they don't wanna use the damn thing in the first place, so we might as well have something they wanna use. And we can afford it now.
All right, any further discussion on the capital items of the ambulance? All right, do I have a motion to approve the capital items submitted for ambulance as requested?
Motion to approve as is.
We have Bob and Phyllis in second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed?
We need it.
All right.
Richard, his lost his statement.
We didn't get approval.
Oh,
It's not my favorite name.
We talked about it.
That what?
Okay.
Okay.
That's like this is what we did. Okay.